They said she deserved it, that an Omega who couldn't submit had no place in the pack. When Lyra crossed into the forbidden Northern Territory with her infant daughter strapped to her chest, she knew the stories. Alphas, there didn't negotiate, didn't show mercy. They killed trespassers. But winter was closing in, and her daughter's lips were turning blue. So she made a choice that would change everything. She stepped over the boundary line carved into the frozen earth, leaving her old life behind forever. What she didn't know was that the most feared alpha in the North was watching. If you want to see how an outcast Omega became the one thing the North never expected, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. The wind cut like broken glass. Lyra pulled the tattered blanket tighter around Era, but it did nothing. The fabric was thin, worn through in places where the threads had given up. Her daughter's small body trembled against her chest, wrapped in what used to be Lyra's only good shawl. Now it was just another piece of survival gear, stained with mud and fraying at the edges. 3 weeks since the exile, 21 days of walking, hiding, scrounging for anything edible. Lyra had stopped counting the hours. Her feet were numb inside her boots. Boots that had been scavenged from an abandoned trader's camp 2 days north. They were too big, stuffed with moss to keep them on, but they were better than the shredded remnants of her old shoes. Everything she owned now was borrowed, stolen, or found. Everything except Era. The baby whimpered, a thin sound that got lost in the wind. "I know, sweetheart, I know." Lyra's voice cracked. She hadn't had water in hours. The last stream had been frozen solid, and she'd wasted precious energy trying to break through the ice with a rock before giving up. Ahead, the landscape stretched endlessly, white, brutal, indifferent. The northern frontier, forbidden territory. The place where her old pack's authority ended and something far worse began. She'd heard the stories all her life. The northern packs were savage. Their alpha was a monster who ruled with violence and fear. They didn't take in strays. They didn't show mercy. Cross the boundary, and you belonged to them, if they let you live long enough to claim you. But Lyra was out of options. Behind her, the southern territories offered nothing but death. The pack that had cast her out would kill her on sight if she tried to return. Not for defiance. They'd already punished her for that. No, they'd kill her to erase the embarrassment. An Omega who'd refused her arranged bond, who'd fought back when they tried to force it, who'd gotten pregnant by someone they deemed unworthy. She was a stain on their precious order. When they'd discovered the pregnancy, they'd given her a choice. Give up the child, accept the bond, submit completely, or leave. She'd chosen the cold. Era made another sound, weaker this time. Lyra looked down at her daughter's tiny face, barely visible within the cocoon of fabric. 4 months old, too young for this. Too fragile. "We're going to make it," Lyra whispered. The lie tasted bitter. "I promise." The wind picked up, and with it came the first scattered flakes of snow. Not the gentle, pretty kind from children's stories. These were hard, sharp, driven by a wind that wanted to strip the skin from her bones. Lyra forced her legs to keep moving. One step, then another. Her body was beyond exhausted. It was operating on something else now, some primitive instinct that wouldn't let her stop even when stopping seemed like the only logical choice. She'd been born an Omega in a world that treated Omegas like property. Useful for bonding, for breeding, for cementing pack alliances. Her mother had told her to be grateful for her designation. "Omegas are valued," she'd said, smoothing Lyra's hair when she was barely old enough to understand. "You'll never want for anything." What her mother hadn't said, valued, didn't mean free, didn't mean choice, didn't mean yours. The bond they'd tried to force on her, Marcus, a beta from a neighboring pack, twice her age and cruel in the casual way of men who'd never been told no, would have been a death sentence of a different kind. Slow, suffocating. Safe, maybe, in the way a cage is safe. She'd refused. The pack elders had been shocked. Omegas didn't refuse. It wasn't done. When she'd stood her ground, they'd called her defective, broken. When she'd gotten pregnant by Thomas, a kind Omega from the lower ranks, someone she'd actually chosen, they'd called her a whore. The baby had sealed her fate. "Give it up," the pack alpha had said, his voice flat and final. "Give up the child. Accept Marcus. And this ends." You'll be forgiven. Lyra had looked at him. This man who'd known her since birth, who'd eaten at her family's table, who'd once told her she reminded him of his own daughter and seen nothing but ice. No. That single word had cost her everything. Her family hadn't fought for her. Her mother had cried, but she hadn't argued. Her father had turned his back. Her younger sister had watched from a window as they'd escorted Lyra to the pack boundary, and she hadn't said goodbye. They'd stripped her of her pack markings, taken her identification papers, left her with nothing but the clothes on her back and the child in her arms. "Cross back over," the enforcer had said, "and we kill you both." That had been 3 weeks ago. Lyra stumbled, caught herself against a twisted tree that was more ice than wood. Her vision swam. When had she last eaten? Yesterday? The day before? There'd been some kind of root she'd dug up from beneath the snow, bitter and stringy but edible. Before that? She couldn't remember. Era was nursing less. Lyra's body, starved and dehydrated, was running dry. The snow was falling harder now. The world was disappearing into white static. She had to find shelter. Had to. Her eyes scanned the endless landscape. There, maybe a quarter-mile ahead, or maybe it was a mile, distances were impossible to judge now, something dark against the white. Trees? A rock formation? Could be nothing. Could be salvation. Lyra aimed herself toward it and walked. The wind screamed around her. Her legs were shaking with each step. Era had gone quiet, and that was worse than crying. Quiet meant she was getting too cold. Quiet meant, "No," Lyra said out loud. "No, no, no. Stay with me, baby. Stay with me." She pulled the blanket aside just enough to see Era's face. Her daughter's eyes were closed, her tiny chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Her lips had a blue tinge that made Lyra's heart stop. Era, wake up. Look at Mama." Nothing. Lyra pressed her daughter against her chest, trying to share whatever body heat she had left. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. The dark shape was closer now. Definitely trees, a dense cluster of them, crowded together in a way that might block the wind. Maybe there'd be space beneath the branches. Maybe a sound. Lyra froze. Not wind, not her imagination. A voice. Faint, almost lost in the storm, but there. A child's voice. "Help! Please! Someone!" Every instinct screamed at her to keep walking. She had nothing to give. She was barely alive herself. Getting involved with anyone else right now was suicide. But the voice came again, younger than she'd thought, terrified. "Mom! Dad! Where are you?" A child, lost in the storm, alone. Lyra stood there, swaying, her daughter dying against her chest, and faced the kind of choice that shouldn't exist. Save her own child by preserving what little energy she had left, or spend it on a stranger who might already be beyond help. She thought of her old pack, how they'd weighed her worth against their convenience and found her wanting, how they'd chosen rules over mercy, order over compassion. "Fuck them," she whispered. She turned toward the voice. The trees were thicker here, and the snow hadn't penetrated as deeply. Between the heavy branches, she could make out small clearings, spaces where someone might take shelter. The voice was coming from somewhere close. "Hey!" Lyra called out, her voice barely carrying. "Hey kid, where are you?" Silence. Then, "Here! I'm here!" Lyra pushed through the branches, snow cascading down on her. Her hands were too numb to feel the scrape of bark, the cut of frozen needles. There, huddled against the base of a massive pine, half buried in snow, a small figure. A boy. Maybe 7 years old, maybe younger, dark hair plastered to his head, eyes wide with fear and cold. His clothes were better than hers, actual winter gear, thick and well-made, but he'd been out here too long. His lips were blue, his whole body shook violently. He looked up at her like she was a miracle. "Please," he said, "please, I can't find them, I can't." "It's okay." Lyra dropped to her knees beside him, pain shooting through her frozen joints. "It's okay. I've got you. My parents, the pack, we were traveling and the storm came and I got separated and I don't know where." "Not now. First we get you warm." She assessed him quickly. No obvious injuries. Hypothermia setting in, but not too far gone. He was scared more than hurt. Her pack? The realization hit like a punch. This child belonged to a pack. Somewhere out in this storm, people were looking for him, probably already searching. And if they found him with Lyra, an Omega with no pack markings, no identification, clearly starving and desperate, they'd assume the worst. She should leave him, right now, walk away while she still could. The boy's teeth chattered so hard she could hear them. He looked up at her with complete trust, like she was going to fix everything. Lyra had never hated herself more than in that moment, because she knew she wasn't going to walk away. "All right," she said, making her voice steady even as her mind raced. "What's your name?" Kyle? Kyle, good. I'm Lyra. Can you walk?" He tried to stand and immediately collapsed. His legs had given out from the cold. Perfect. Just perfect. Lyra adjusted Era in her wrap, making sure her daughter was secure, then reached for Kyle. "Come on, I'm going to help you up." He was heavier than she expected, or she was weaker than she thought. Probably both. She got him to his feet, let him lean against her. I think there was a cabin," Kyle said through chattering teeth. "Before the storm got bad, I saw something. That way, maybe?" A cabin. Shelter. It was more than she'd dared hope for. "Show me." They moved together through the trees, Kyle stumbling, Lyra half dragging him. Era remained eerily quiet against her chest. Each step was agony. Her body was screaming at her to stop, to rest, but she pushed forward because there was no other choice. The trees began to thin. Ahead, barely visible through the driving snow, a dark shape emerged. Not natural. Angular. Man-made. "There!" Kale pointed with a shaking hand. The cabin was small, ancient, probably abandoned. The roof sagged on one side, and one of the windows had been covered with planks, but it had 4 walls and a door. It was the most beautiful thing Lyra had ever seen. She hauled Kyle to the entrance. The door was stuck, swollen from moisture or jammed with ice. She threw her shoulder against it once, twice, and on the third hit, it gave way with a groan of protesting wood. Inside was dark, musty, but blessedly still. The wind's scream cut off as she pulled the door shut behind them. For a moment, they just stood there. The silence was overwhelming. Then Kyle's legs gave out completely, and Lyra barely managed to lower him to the floor before her own legs failed. They sat in the darkness, 3 people who shouldn't be alive, and breathed. Lyra's eyes adjusted slowly. The cabin was a single room, empty except for the skeleton of an old fireplace against one wall and some debris in the corners. No furniture, no supplies. But it was shelter from the wind, and right now that was everything. "Cold," Kale mumbled. He was curling in on himself, and Lyra recognized the signs. He was shutting down. "No, hey, stay awake." She reached for him, shook his shoulder gently. "Kyle, look at me. Stay awake." She needed fire, needed warmth, needed... Era stirred against her chest, making a small sound that was barely there. Lyra's hands moved automatically, unwrapping her daughter, checking her. Era's skin was so cold, too cold. Her tiny fingers were curled tight, her face pale. "No, no, no, baby, come on, come on!" She pressed Era against her bare skin, trying to share whatever warmth she had left. It wasn't enough. She was failing. She was losing. A soft cry. Weak, thin, but there. Era's eyes opened just a fraction. Her little mouth moved, seeking. "Yes. Yes, that's it. That's my girl." Lyra positioned her daughter to nurse, and thank God, thank everything, Era latched on. The pull was weak, but it was something. Beside her, Kyle had started to shiver again, violent, racking shudders. That was actually good. Shivering meant his body was still fighting. "Kyle, buddy, I need you to do something for me." Lyra kept her voice calm, authoritative. "See that fireplace? I need you to check if there's anything inside it. Old wood, debris, anything that might burn. Can you do that?" He nodded, moving slowly. Having a task seemed to help him focus. While he checked the fireplace, Lyra scanned the cabin more carefully. There, in the corner, what looked like the remains of an old wooden crate. And there, some kind of dried plant matter, maybe old thatch from the roof. It wasn't much, but it might be enough. There's some wood pieces, Kael called out, his voice stronger. And I think this is part of a chair. It's broken. Perfect. Bring it all to the middle of the floor. We're going to build a fire. She'd never been good at fire building. It had always been someone else's job. First her father's, then the pack's designated firekeepers. Omegas weren't expected to handle such things. But Omegas also weren't expected to survive alone in the northern frontier with an infant, and yet here she was. Lyra settled Era carefully, wrapping her daughter in every bit of fabric she had, then moved to help Kael. Together, a starving Omega and a half-frozen child, they arranged the scraps of wood and debris. Starting the fire was the problem. Lyra had no flint, no matches, nothing that could create a spark. "Do you have anything?" she asked Kael. "Anything in your pockets?" He searched, pulling out a small knife, good quality, with a metal handle, and a smooth stone that looked like it had been polished. Just these. The knife. The stone. If she could create enough friction, get a spark into the dried plant matter, it took 17 tries. Lyra's hands were bleeding by the time the first tiny ember caught, a pinpoint of orange in the darkness. She cupped it carefully, breathing on it gently, feeding it the driest pieces of plant fiber. Come on, please." The ember spread. Smoke curled upward. A small flame flickered to life. Kael made a sound of pure relief. Lyra fed the flame carefully, adding bigger pieces as it grew stronger. The wood was damp and fought her, hissing and smoking, but eventually it caught properly. Real fire, real heat. The warmth hit her face like a blessing. "Closer," she told Kael, pulling him toward the fire. "Get as close as you can without touching." He obeyed, holding his hands out to the flames. Color was slowly returning to his face. Lyra retrieved Era, brought her daughter close to the warmth. Era's eyes opened wider, and she made a small sound that might have been contentment. For the first time in 3 weeks, Lyra felt something that wasn't despair. They sat like that as the storm raged outside. 3 people warming themselves by a desperate fire in an abandoned cabin. The wind hammered at the walls, but the cabin held. "Thank you," Kael said quietly. "You saved me." Lyra didn't know what to say to that. She hadn't saved him, not really. She'd just delayed the inevitable. When the storm passed, his pack would find them. They'd ask questions she couldn't answer. They'd see her lack of markings, her state, the baby, and they'd make assumptions. Best case, they'd take Kael and leave her. Worst case, she pushed the thought away. That was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, they were alive. "What pack are you from?" she asked. Might as well know what she was dealing with. "The Northern Pack," Kael said, like it was obvious. "My father is—" He stopped, his expression changing. There was pride there, and something else. Hesitation? "Your father is what?" "He's the alpha of everything, all the Northern Territories." The fire crackled in the silence. Draven. The child belonged to Draven. Lyra had saved the son of the most dangerous alpha in the north, the man whose territory she'd just illegally entered, the man whose reputation was built on violence and absolute control. She'd saved his son, and when he found them, there was no possible way this ended well for her. Kael was watching her, waiting for a reaction. Lyra made herself smile. "That's good. That means lots of people are looking for you. You'll be home soon." "What about you?" Kael asked. "What pack are you from?" "I'm—" The truth stuck in her throat. No pack. Exiled. Branded unworthy. "I'm between packs right now, traveling." It was technically true. She was definitely between packs, between the one that had thrown her out and the one whose territory she'd invaded. Kael frowned. "But you have a baby. You shouldn't be traveling alone with a baby. That's not safe." Out of the mouths of children. "No," Lyra agreed quietly. "It's not." Before Kael could ask more questions, Era started to fuss. Lyra adjusted her, checked her. Warmer now, more alert. Her daughter looked up at her with eyes that were starting to focus, starting to really see. 4 months old, she'd never known safety, never known warmth except what Lyra could steal or scrounge, never known a full belly or a soft bed or any of the things babies were supposed to have. She deserved better than this. "She's pretty," Kael said, leaning over to look. "What's her name?" "Era." Era, he repeated, testing the sound. That's nice. Can I touch her hand? Lyra should say no, should keep distance between them. But Kael's expression was so hopeful, so genuinely kind, that she found herself nodding. He reached out one small finger and Era's tiny hand wrapped around it reflexively. Kael's whole face lit up. She's strong, he said, delighted. Yeah, Lyra said softly. She is. They stayed like that, an impossible tableau of survival, as the storm continued its assault on the cabin. The fire burned low, and Lyra fed it more wood, making it last. Her body was screaming for sleep, but she didn't dare. Not yet. Kael's eyes were drooping despite his best efforts. You can sleep, Lyra told him. I'll keep watch. You should sleep too, he mumbled, already fading. You look really tired. I'm okay. Within minutes, he was out, curled on his side near the fire. He looked even younger asleep, a child who should have been safe at home, not lost in a storm fighting for his life. Lyra held Era and stared into the flames. She'd crossed into forbidden territory, knowing the risks. She'd accepted that her choices might lead to her death, but she'd thought she'd die alone, in the snow, with just Era. Quick, clean, final. This was worse, because now there was hope, and hope was dangerous. The Northern Alpha's son, she'd saved him. That had to count for something, right? Maybe when his father found them, maybe he'd show mercy because of that. Maybe… Stop it. Don't do that to yourself. Alphas didn't show mercy to Omega trespassers. They especially didn't show mercy to ones with no pack, no marking, no explanation for being in their territory with their child. Best case scenario, Draven would take his son and let her leave. That's all she could hope for. Era stirred against her, making the soft sounds that meant she was hungry again. Lyra positioned her to nurse, wincing at the pull. There was so little left to give. Outside, the storm was beginning to weaken. The wind's howl was dropping to a shriek, then to a moan. By morning, it would be over. By morning, they would come. Lyra looked down at her daughter, the baby who'd cost her everything, who was worth everything, who deserved a life better than what Lyra could provide. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I tried. I really tried. Era's eyes were closed, her small face peaceful as she nursed. She had no idea, no concept of the danger they were in, the consequences coming, the fact that her mother had made choices that might get them both killed. Maybe that was a blessing. Lyra must have dozed without meaning to, because one moment she was staring at the fire and the next she was jerking awake to silence. The storm had stopped. Outside the cabin, everything was still. Kael was still asleep. Era too. The fire had burned down to coals, but the cabin had retained enough heat that they weren't freezing. Lyra carefully extracted herself from the pile of blankets, settled Era gently, and moved to the door. It took effort to open it. Snow had piled against the outside, but she managed. The world beyond was transformed, everything buried under fresh white, sparkling in the early morning light. The trees bowed under the weight of snow. The sky was clear, painfully blue. It was beautiful. It was also a problem. Fresh snow meant easy tracking. Anyone searching would be able to follow her footprints directly to the cabin. She had maybe hours before. A sound. Distant but distinct. Voices. Multiple voices calling out in coordinated patterns. They were here. The search party had already found the area. Lyra's heart hammered against her ribs. She stepped back inside, pulled the door closed as quietly as she could. Kael was stirring. Lyra? It's okay, she said automatically. The storm's over. He sat up, rubbing his eyes. Then he heard what she'd heard, the voices getting closer, and his whole expression changed to relief. They found us. Dad's here. He stopped, looking at her, really looking at her, at the fear she couldn't quite hide. Lyra? What's wrong? How did she explain that she was terrified of the very rescue he was celebrating, that the man coming to save his son might very well destroy her? She couldn't. He was a child. He shouldn't have to carry that. Nothing's wrong, she lied. I'm glad they found you. The voices were much closer now. She could make out individual words, commands being called out in low authoritative tones. Spread out, check every structure. Tracks leading this way. Move now. Kael was already at the door, pulling it open. "Dad, we're here! We're—" He didn't finish because the door burst inward hard enough to slam against the wall, and a man filled the doorway. Not just any man. An alpha in his prime, radiating power so intensely it made the air feel heavy. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair, and eyes that swept the cabin in a single assessing glance. Those eyes found Cale first, and something in the man's face cracked, just for a second, before hardening again. "Cale." "Dad!" Cale ran to him, and the alpha, Draven, it had to be, caught his son, checking him over with hands that were surprisingly gentle. "Are you hurt?" "No, I'm okay. Lyra saved me. She built a fire and kept me warm, and—" Those dark eyes shifted, found Lyra. She was standing against the far wall, Era clutched to her chest, trying to make herself small. It didn't work. There was nowhere to hide. Draven's gaze locked onto her, and Lyra felt it like a physical weight. He was evaluating her. Threat assessment, instant calculation. She saw the moment he registered the lack of pack markings on her skin, the condition of her clothes, the baby in her arms. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. The gentle father disappeared, replaced by the alpha. "You," he said. His voice was quiet, controlled, and somehow that made it worse. "Who are you?" Lyra opened her mouth. Nothing came out. More figures appeared behind Draven, pack members, enforcers probably, armed and ready. They filled the doorway, blocked the cabin's only exit. "I asked you a question." Still quiet, still controlled. "Who are you?" Era chose that moment to cry, a thin, reedy sound that echoed in the sudden silence. Draven's eyes dropped to the baby, then back to Lyra's face. "Answer me," he said, "or I will assume the worst." And Lyra, standing there with her daughter crying, and a pack of armed enforcers surrounding her, and the most dangerous alpha in the north staring her down, realized something. She wasn't going to lie. She wasn't going to grovel. She'd spent her whole life being told she was worth less, being forced to submit, being pushed into corners. Not anymore. She lifted her chin, met Draven's eyes directly, something Omegas weren't supposed to do to alphas they didn't know, and said clearly, "My name is Lyra. I have no pack. I crossed into your territory because I had nowhere else to go. I found your son lost in the storm, and I saved him. That's the truth. Do with it what you want." The cabin went absolutely silent. Draven stared at her, the enforcers behind him tensed, waiting for orders. Cale looked between them, confused. "Dad, what's—" "Quiet, Cale." Draven didn't look away from Lyra. "An Omega with no pack, no markings, trespassing in my territory, with an infant." Each word was precise, measured. "Give me one reason I shouldn't have you executed where you stand." Lyra's arms tightened around Era. "I don't have one, but my daughter didn't choose this. Let her live, and I'll accept whatever judgment you make." Something flickered across Draven's face. Not sympathy, she didn't dare hope for that, but maybe recognition, like he understood the calculus she was making. "You saved my son," he said. "Yes." "Why?" "Because he needed help." "That's not an answer. You had nothing to gain from it. You risked drawing attention to yourself. Why?" Lyra met his stare. "Because leaving a child to die in the snow would have made me the monster you think I am." The silence stretched. Draven's jaw worked like he was chewing on something unpleasant. Finally, he turned to one of the enforcers. "Take Kyle back to the convoy. Have the medic check him over." "Dad, wait. Now, Kyle." The boy was ushered out, protesting. Lyra watched him go, her only witness disappearing. When they were alone, or as alone as they could be with enforcers still crowding the doorway, Draven stepped fully into the cabin. The space felt smaller with him in it. The air felt thinner. "You understand," he said quietly, "that I am within my rights to kill you. Trespassing on Alpha territory is an executable offense. You know this." "I know." "And yet you came anyway." "I came because staying where I was meant watching my daughter die. So I chose to die here instead, where at least there was a chance." Lyra's voice was steady, even though everything inside her was screaming. I know what I am. I know what I look like to you, but I'm not a spy. I'm not a threat, and I'm not trying to challenge your authority. I'm just trying to keep my child alive. Draven studied her for a long moment. Where's your pack? Gone. Your family? Turned their backs. The father of your child? Lyra's throat tightened. Dead. It was technically true. Thomas had died 2 months ago in an accident at the Southern Pack's lumber mill. She'd found out 3 days after the exile from a traveling merchant who hadn't known she'd been cast out. He'd died never knowing about Era. Draven's expression didn't soften, but something in his eyes shifted. You were exiled. It wasn't a question. Yes. For what? For refusing a bond, for getting pregnant outside the Pack's arrangement, for not submitting. Lyra lifted her chin higher, for choosing my own life instead of the one they decided I should have. And you thought my territory would be better? I thought it couldn't be worse. A muscle in Draven's jaw ticked. For a second, just a second, something that might have been dark humor crossed his face. Then it was gone. My son says you saved his life, he said. That you could have left him but didn't. That you risked yourself and your child to help him. Yes, that puts me in your debt. Lyra blinked. Whatever she'd expected, it wasn't that. A life debt, Draven said firmly. My son for yours. That's the law here. You saved Kyle, so I owe you protection. 1 life for 1 life. I didn't do it for payment. I know. That's why the debt stands. He turned toward the door, then stopped. But understand this. A life debt means you and your daughter are under my protection until it's fulfilled. That means you come back to the stronghold. You submit to Pack law. You accept my authority. Lyra's mind raced. Protection. The stronghold. A place for Era to be warm, to be fed. But also submission. Pack law. Another alpha making decisions for her. She looked down at Era, who was staring up at her with eyes that were starting to really see. Starting to understand the world was more than hunger and cold. What choice did she have? I accept, she said. Good. Draven moved to the door, then paused one more time. And Lyra, don't make me regret this. He left, barking orders to the enforcers. Someone would bring a vehicle around. Someone would get medical supplies. Move. Now. Lyra stood in the empty cabin, her daughter in her arms, and tried to process what had just happened. She'd come here to die. Instead, she'd found the one thing she'd thought was impossible. A chance. Not freedom. She understood that. Draven's protection came with strings, with rules, with all the things she'd tried to escape. But it came with warmth, with food, with safety for Era. For that, she could submit to 1 more alpha. For that, she could play by 1 more set of rules. For her daughter, she could do anything, even trust the monster of the north. The convoy moved through the snow like a predator, silent, efficient, unstoppable. Lyra sat in the back of the 3rd vehicle, wedged between 2 enforcers who hadn't said a word since they'd loaded her in. Era was strapped to her chest, finally warm enough to sleep peacefully. The heater blasted hot air that felt like luxury after weeks in the cold, but Lyra couldn't relax. Every few minutes, one of the enforcers would glance at her. Not hostile exactly, just watching, making sure she knew she was contained. Through the window, she could see Draven's vehicle at the front, a massive black SUV that looked like it could drive through a mountain if needed. Kale was in there somewhere, probably being fussed over, checked for injuries, wrapped in blankets and given hot food. Her daughter slept against her chest with nothing but Lyra's body heat and a borrowed blanket. The difference between them couldn't be clearer. How far to the stronghold? Lyra asked, breaking the silence. The enforcer on her left, a woman with sharp features and cold gray eyes, answered without looking at her. Another hour, maybe less. And when we get there, you'll be processed. Processed. Like cargo, like something that needed to be categorized and filed away. What does that mean? Medical check, background verification, assignment of quarters. The woman's tone was clipped, professional. Standard procedure for anyone entering Pack territory. I don't have background to verify. I already told the Alpha. Which is exactly why you'll be processed. The woman finally turned to look at her, and her expression was unreadable. You show up with no pack, no papers, no explanation except I was exiled. You think we just take that at face value? The enforcer on Lyra's right, a younger man with a scar across his jaw, shifted uncomfortably. Vera, ease up. The Alpha said she's under protection. The Alpha says a lot of things, Vera replied. Doesn't mean we stop doing our jobs. Lyra kept her mouth shut. Arguing wouldn't help. These people didn't trust her, and honestly, she couldn't blame them. From their perspective, she was exactly what she looked like. A desperate Omega who'd crossed into their territory with a convenient story about saving the Alpha's son. The fact that it was true didn't make it sound less suspicious. Eris stirred, making a small sound. Lyra adjusted her automatically, checking to make sure the blanket was secure. Her daughter's tiny hand curled against her collarbone, and Lyra felt that familiar surge of fierce protectiveness that had kept her alive these past weeks. Whatever happened next, she'd handle it. She had to. The convoy crested a hill, and suddenly the stronghold was visible in the valley below. Lyra had expected something crude, rough buildings thrown together for survival, maybe a wall or fence. What she saw instead took her breath away. The stronghold was a fortress. Multiple stone buildings arranged in a defensive pattern, surrounded by walls that had to be 20 feet high. Watchtowers at each corner, gates that looked like they could withstand a siege. This wasn't a camp or a settlement. This was a statement of power. Welcome to the north, Vera said dryly. The vehicles descended into the valley. As they approached the gates, Lyra could see people moving along the walls, guards, she assumed, tracking their approach. The gates began to open, massive hinges groaning. They drove through into a courtyard that was larger than her entire former pack's central square. People were everywhere, working, training, moving with purpose. They stopped what they were doing to watch the convoy arrive, their faces curious but guarded. The vehicles came to a halt. Doors opened. The enforcers climbed out with military precision. Vera gestured to Lyra. Out. Stay close. Lyra stepped down from the vehicle and immediately felt the weight of dozens of eyes on her. Whispers started spreading through the crowd like wildfire. No pack markings. Where did she come from? With a baby? In winter? Must be the one who found Kael. Lyra pulled the blanket tighter around Era and kept her head up. Let them look. Let them whisper. She'd survived worse than gossip. Draven emerged from the lead vehicle, Kael right beside him. The boy looked better already. Clean clothes, color in his cheeks, moving without the desperate weakness that had marked him in the cabin. Dad, where's Lyra? Kael was asking. Is she… Oh! He spotted her and immediately pulled away from his father, running over. Lyra, you're here! Hey, Kael. She managed to smile. Feeling better? Yeah, the medic said I'm fine, just a little cold. But I told them about you, about how you saved me and built the fire and everything. Kael. Draven's voice cut through the chatter. Inside! Now! The boy's face fell. But… now! Kael shot Lyra an apologetic look before trudging toward one of the buildings. A woman emerged to meet him, older, with kind eyes and graying hair, and ushered him inside with gentle efficiency. Draven turned to Vera. Take her to the medical wing. Full examination, then to processing. Already planned, sir. And postguards. No one talks to her without clearance. Vera's eyebrows rose slightly. You think she's a risk? I think we don't know what she is yet. Draven's gaze flicked to Lyra, then away. Until we do, we take precautions. He walked off without another word, barking orders to other pack members. Within seconds, he was surrounded by people needing his attention, his decision, his authority. Lyra watched him go and felt something cold settle in her stomach. Protection, he'd said. A life debt. But protection looked a lot like imprisonment from where she stood. This way, Vera said, already moving. The medical wing was in the eastern building, clean, well-lit, stocked with supplies that would have made her old pack's healer weep with envy. A man in his 40s with gentle hands and a no-nonsense expression introduced himself as Marcus. Not the same Marcus who'd tried to force a bond on her. Different name, different person, but the coincidence still made her tense. I'm going to examine you and the baby, Marcus said. Make sure you're both healthy. Is that all right? like she had a choice. Yes. The examination was thorough but not invasive. Marcus checked Era first, his movements practiced and sure. He listened to her heart, checked her eyes and ears, felt along her tiny limbs. She's underweight, he said quietly, probably a month behind where she should be developmentally. Signs of mild malnutrition, but no immediate danger. You've kept her alive against serious odds. Lyra's throat tightened. Can you help her? Yes. We'll start with proper nutrition for you. Your milk production is probably compromised. Supplements, good food, rest, she'll catch up. He looked at Lyra with something that might have been respect. You did well, under the circumstances. Then it was Lyra's turn. The examination revealed what she already knew. She was severely malnourished, dehydrated, running on fumes. Marcus's expression grew grimmer as he worked. How long since you've had a proper meal? I don't know, weeks. And before that, I ate what I could find. It wasn't a priority. It should have been. Marcus's tone was sharp. You can't feed a baby if you're starving yourself. I know that, Lyra snapped, her patience fraying. You think I don't know that? I did the best I could with what I had. Marcus paused, then nodded slowly. Yes, you did. I apologize. He made notes on a tablet. I'm prescribing a strict nutrition plan. You'll eat 4 meals a day, minimum. Protein, fats, carbohydrates, real food, not scraps. And you'll rest. Your body needs time to recover. How long? For full recovery? Months. But you should see improvement within a week if you follow the plan. A week. She could do a week. After the medical exam came processing, Vera escorted her to a small office where another pack member, a woman named Sarah with tired eyes and a bureaucratic demeanor, asked questions Lyra couldn't fully answer. Full name? Lyra Thorne. Former pack? Southern Ridge Pack. Reason for leaving? Exile. Sarah's fingers paused over her keyboard. Exile for what offense? Refusing an arranged bond. Pregnancy outside pack approval. Do you have documentation of the exile? They didn't exactly give me paperwork when they threw me out. Former Alpha's name? Marcus Wren. Any pack members who can verify your identity? Lyra laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. No one from that pack is going to verify anything about me. I'm dead to them. Sarah sighed. This is going to be a problem. Without verification, I know I'm a security risk. I could be anyone, claiming anything. I could be a spy or a threat or just a liar looking for shelter. Lyra leaned forward. But I'm not. I'm exactly what I said I am. And honestly, I'm too tired to care if you believe me or not. The women stared at each other across the desk. Finally, Sarah returned to her typing. We'll send inquiries to Southern Ridge Pack. If they confirm your exile, that's verification enough. Until then, you'll be housed in the guest wing under supervision. Supervised, right. It's for everyone's safety. Including mine? Sarah's expression flickered with something that might have been sympathy. Especially yours. You're an outsider in a pack that doesn't take kindly to outsiders. The supervision cuts both ways. That was fair, Lyra supposed. The quarters they assigned her were better than anything she'd had in weeks. A small room with an actual bed, clean sheets, a bathroom with running hot water. There was a bassinet for Era, blankets that were soft and warm, a window with thick curtains. It was also clearly a holding cell. The door had a lock on the outside. There were no personal belongings, no decoration, nothing that suggested permanence. Vera stationed herself outside the door. Someone will bring food in an hour. If you need anything, knock. Am I a prisoner? You're protected, Vera said flatly. Learn the difference. The door closed with a firm click. Lyra stood in the middle of the room, Era in her arms, and tried to process everything that had happened in the last 6 hours. This morning, she'd been in an abandoned cabin, waiting to die. Now she was in a fortress, under the protection, or surveillance, of the most powerful alpha in the north, with food coming and a bed to sleep in and medical care for her daughter. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like waiting for the other shoe to drop. The food arrived exactly when promised, brought by a young woman who wouldn't make eye contact and left quickly. The meal was simple but substantial: roasted meat, vegetables, bread, cheese. more food than Lyra had seen in a month. She fed Era first, grateful that her milk seemed to be coming easier already. Then she ate slowly, carefully, knowing her stomach would rebel if she rushed after so long without proper nutrition. The meat was tender and seasoned with herbs she couldn't name. The bread was still warm. Everything tasted like something from a different life. Lyra ate until she couldn't anymore, then wrapped the leftovers carefully. Habits from weeks of scarcity died hard. After, she gave Era a proper bath in the small sink, the first real bath her daughter had ever had. Era seemed confused by the warm water at first, then delighted, splashing with her tiny hands and making sounds that were almost laughs. "Yeah," Lyra murmured, washing her daughter's wispy dark hair. "Warm water is pretty great, isn't it?" She dried Era carefully, wrapped her in one of the soft blankets, and laid her in the bassinet. Her daughter's eyes were already drooping, belly full and body warm. For the first time in her short life, Era looked peaceful. Lyra stood over the bassinet and felt something crack in her chest. Relief, grief, exhaustion. Everything she'd been holding back for weeks came crashing down at once. She made it to the bed before her legs gave out. Then she curled on her side and cried, quiet, shaking sobs that she muffled against the pillow. She'd kept her daughter alive. Against impossible odds, through exile in winter and starvation, she'd kept Era breathing. But what now? What came after survival? She didn't know. And that terrified her more than the cold ever had. The next 3 days followed the same pattern. Meals arrived on schedule. Marcus checked on them daily. Vera or another guard was always stationed outside. Lyra was allowed to walk in a small courtyard for fresh air, always escorted, always watched, but otherwise confined to her room. She saw Kyle once, on the second day. He'd somehow convinced his caretaker to bring him by, and he talked excitedly about everything Lyra had missed. The Stronghold's training grounds, the library, the kennels where they kept hunting dogs. "You should see the dogs, Lyra. They're huge. And Dad says when I'm older, I can help train them." And Kyle, the woman with him, the same one who'd collected him from the courtyard, touched his shoulder gently. "We should go. Your father will be looking for you." "But I wanted to show Lyra." "Another time." Kale had left reluctantly, waving over his shoulder. The woman had given Lyra a long, assessing look before following. That night, the whispers started filtering through the walls. Pack members talking in the hallways, their voices low, but not quite low enough. Can't trust her. Convenient, isn't it? Showing up right when Kyle got lost. Probably planned the whole thing. Omega with no pack? She's either a spy or she's running from something worse. Lyra lay in bed, listening, and felt the familiar weight of judgment settling over her like a shroud. On the fourth day, everything changed. It started with a commotion in the hallway, raised voices, the sound of rapid footsteps. Lyra was nursing Era when the door burst open without warning. A man she didn't recognize stood there, flanked by 2 other pack members. He was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and eyes that reminded her of winter ice. "You," he said, pointing at Lyra. "On your feet." Lyra carefully detached Era, who immediately started crying. "What's going on?" "We received word from Southern Ridge Pack about you." Her blood went cold. "And? And you're not who you claim to be." The room tilted. "What are you talking about? I told you exactly. You told us you were exiled for refusing a bond and having a child." The man stepped into the room, his expression hard. "You didn't mention the theft, or the assault, or the fact that Southern Ridge Pack has a warrant out for your arrest." Lyra's mind went blank. "That's not... I never..." "Save it." Alpha Wren was very clear in his communication. "You're a criminal, and you've brought that criminality into our territory." "Wren is lying." Lyra's voice shook with fury. "He's lying because I refused to submit, because I wouldn't give up my daughter. This is exactly what I knew he'd do." "Convenient that everyone who could verify your story is a liar." The man gestured to the guards. "Take her to holding. The child goes to the nursery until..." "No!" Lyra clutched Era tighter. "You're not taking her. I don't care what lies Wren told you. You're not... You don't have a choice." One of the guards moved forward. Lyra backed up, her mind racing. The window was too small. The door was blocked. There was nowhere to go. Era was screaming now, picking up on her mother's panic. Please, Lyra said, hating the desperation in her voice. Please, just let me talk to Draven. Let me explain. The Alpha is occupied with pack business. He doesn't have time for... Then make time. Lyra's voice cracked. He said I was under his protection. He owes me a life debt. You can't just... A life debt is void if the person is a criminal, the man said coldly, which you are. Now give us the child or we will take her by force. The guards stepped closer. Lyra looked at their faces, impassive, following orders, not interested in her explanations or her tears. She thought about fighting, about screaming for help, about throwing herself at them and hoping she could somehow get past. But she was one person against three, weakened from weeks of starvation, holding an infant. There was no winning here. Can I? Her voice broke. Can I at least say goodbye? The man hesitated, then nodded once. Lyra looked down at Era, her daughter, her whole world, the only good thing she'd managed to create in her entire wasted life. I'm sorry, she whispered, pressing her lips to Era's forehead. I'm so sorry, baby. I tried so hard. Era's tiny hand grabbed at her mother's hair, holding on. Lyra gently untangled those small fingers and handed her daughter to one of the guards. Era's screams echoed in the hallway as they carried her away. The holding cell was in the basement, cold, bare, with a cot and a bucket and nothing else. They locked her in without ceremony. Lyra sat on the cot and stared at the wall. Ren had done it. He'd found a way to destroy her even from hundreds of miles away. Criminal charges, probably fabricated, definitely impossible to disprove. Theft? She'd taken nothing when she left except her own belongings. Assault? She'd never raised a hand to anyone except in self-defense when they tried to force her into Marcus's quarters, but it didn't matter if the charges were real. What mattered was that Ren had made them, and that gave the Northern Pack an excuse to treat her like a threat. The life debt meant nothing now. Draven's protection meant nothing. She'd saved his son, and in return she'd lost her daughter. Hours passed, maybe days. It was hard to tell in the windowless cell. Someone brought food eventually, slid it through a slot in the door. Lyra couldn't eat. All she could think about was Era's screams. She was curled on the cot, drifting in and out of something that wasn't quite sleep, when she heard voices outside the cell. Unprecedented. Don't care what you think. Open the door. Sir, the council hasn't made a decision yet. The council can kiss my ass. Open the door. That last voice was Draven's. Lyra sat up just as the cell door swung open. The Alpha stood in the doorway, and he looked furious. Out, he said to whoever was with him. Now. Footsteps retreated. Draven stepped inside, and the door closed behind him. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Your Pack Alpha sends his regards, Draven said finally, his voice tight, along with a very detailed list of your supposed crimes. They're lies. I know. Lyra blinked. You? What? I contacted Ren personally, had a very interesting conversation. Draven's jaw was tight. He's a terrible liar when pressed. Also an idiot if he thought I wouldn't verify before taking action. Hope flared in Lyra's chest, painful and desperate. Then I know he's trying to manipulate me into returning you so he can finish what he started. I know the charges are fabricated. Draven's expression was unreadable. I also know my own pack doesn't trust you. Half the council wants you executed as a spy. The other half wants you exiled again. And I'm caught in the middle because of a life debt that's causing more problems than it's worth. The hope died as quickly as it had sparked. So what now? Lyra asked. You hand me over to Ren? Save yourself the trouble? No. The word was flat, final. You saved my son. That debt stands regardless of what anyone else thinks. Then what? Draven moved closer, and Lyra had to fight the urge to back away. The cell was small. He was too close, too large, too much. Now, he said quietly, you tell me the truth. All of it. No omissions, no pretty stories. I need to know exactly what I'm dealing with. And Lyra, who'd spent her whole life being told her truth didn't matter, who'd been dismissed and discounted and branded a liar by people who'd never bothered to listen. Lyra looked at the most feared Alpha in the North and made a choice. My name is Lyra Thorne, she said. I was born into Southern Ridge Pack. My mother was an Omega, my father a Beta. I have a younger sister named Mara. I was raised to be obedient, to accept whatever bond the pack arranged, to never question authority. When I turned 21, they arranged a bond with Marcus Dane, a Beta from a neighboring pack. He was 43. He had a reputation for cruelty that everyone ignored because he was politically valuable. Draven listened without interrupting. I refused the bond. They pressured me. I kept refusing. Then I met Thomas, another Omega, from my own pack. We fell in love, got pregnant. The pack found out. Lyra's voice was steady now, almost clinical. They gave me an ultimatum. Give up the baby, accept Marcus, pretend it never happened, or leave. You chose to leave. I chose my daughter. Lyra met his eyes. They stripped me of my pack markings, took my papers, escorted me to the boundary, told me if I came back they'd kill us both. I walked north because south was hunting territory for packs allied with Ren. East was settled lands that would send me back, and west was open ocean. North was the only direction left. And the charges Ren is making? Lies. All of them. The theft was me taking my own belongings when I left. The assault was me fighting back when Marcus tried to force himself on me the night before the exile. Lyra's hands clenched. Ren is angry because I embarrassed him, because I proved an Omega could refuse. He wants me dead so I can't be an example to others. Draven was quiet for a long time. Your daughter, he said finally. What happened to the father? Dead. Accident at the lumber mill 2 months ago. He never knew about Era. Family. Turned their backs when I was exiled. My mother cried, but she didn't fight for me. My father called me a disgrace. My sister... Lyra's throat tightened. She was 16. She didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. Not in that pack, not for Omegas. Draven's expression shifted, something dark and angry crossing his features. The northern packs have laws about forced bonds, about choice. If Ren tried to force you, I'm not from the north. Your laws don't apply to me. They do now. Draven stepped back, creating space. You're in my territory, under my protection. That makes you subject to northern law. Your council doesn't want me here. The council doesn't decide who gets protection. I do. His voice was hard, absolute. A life debt is sacred. Ren can make all the accusations he wants. I'm not handing you over. Lyra felt something in her chest crack open. Why? Why fight your own pack for someone you don't even know? Draven looked at her for a long moment. Because I was 7 years old when I watched my mother refuse a bond, he said quietly. I watched her pack Alpha beat her for it. Watched them exile her with nothing, in winter, alone. I watched her choose death over submission. His jaw tightened. She didn't survive, and the pack that killed her called it justice. The cell was silent except for their breathing. I built this pack on different laws, Draven continued. Laws that say choice matters, that consent isn't optional, that Omegas aren't property. He met her eyes. So yes, I'll fight my council. Because if I don't, I'm no better than the Alphas who killed my mother. Lyra didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to respond to an Alpha who just revealed something that raw, that personal. Where's Era? She asked instead. The nursery. Being cared for by people who actually know what they're doing. He paused. She's fine. Eating well. Getting round-the-clock attention. She's in better shape than when you arrived. It should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like another failure. Proof that Lyra couldn't care for her own daughter as well as strangers could. Draven must have seen something in her face because his expression softened slightly. You kept her alive through exile, winter, and starvation. Don't discount that. But she needs more than survival now. She needs to thrive. And I can't give her that. Not alone, but here, with support, with resources. He trailed off. Yes, you can. If your pack lets me stay, they will. Draven moved to the door, knocked once. It opened immediately. Because I'm the Alpha, and what I say stands. He started to leave, then paused. One more thing, he said without turning around. Marcus is coming here. Ren's Beta. He's demanding a formal hearing about the charges, claims he has evidence, witnesses, all the bureaucratic bullshit that I can't ignore without causing a diplomatic incident. Lyra's blood ran cold. When? 3 days. The hearing is in 3 days. Draven glanced back at her. Which means you have 3 days to prepare to face the man who tried to force a bond on you, in front of my entire council, and prove he's lying. How am I supposed to prove a negative? I can't prove I didn't steal anything or assault anyone. Then prove he's the monster you say he is. Prove the charges are fabricated. Make the council see what I see. Draven's gaze was intense. Because if you can't, Lyra, I can't protect you. Life, debt or not, if the evidence points to you being a criminal, my pack won't accept you, and I can't rule through force alone. He left without waiting for a response. The door closed, locked. Lyra was alone again. 3 days. In 3 days, she'd have to stand in front of strangers and relive the worst moments of her life. She'd have to face Marcus, the man who tried to own her, who'd put his hands on her when she refused, who'd made it clear he'd break her if she didn't submit. And she'd have to do it without breaking, without giving them the satisfaction of seeing her fear. For Era, for the daughter currently sleeping in a warm nursery, getting everything Lyra couldn't provide. For herself. For the woman she'd fought so hard to remain despite everything trying to crush her. Lyra stood up from the cot, her decision made. If they wanted a hearing, she'd give them one. And Marcus was going to learn that the Omega he'd tried to break had survived things worse than him. They moved her out of the cell the next morning, but the new quarters weren't much better. A room in the lower levels with a guard posted outside 24 hours a day. The window was barred, the door locked from the outside. At least they brought Era back. The moment Lyra saw her daughter, she broke. She'd promised herself she wouldn't, promised she'd stay strong, stay composed. But the second Era was in her arms again, the tears came and wouldn't stop. "I've got you," she whispered into her daughter's soft hair. "I've got you, baby. I'm not letting go again." Era nursed desperately, like she'd been waiting for this, and Lyra felt the familiar tug that was equal parts pain and relief. Her body was still recovering, still learning to produce enough, but it was better than it had been. The meals they'd been forcing on her were helping. The guard who'd brought Era, a young woman with kind eyes, lingered in the doorway. "She cried for you, the whole time. The nursery staff tried everything, but she just wanted her mother." Lyra looked up, vision blurred. "Thank you for bringing her back." "The Alpha ordered it. Said separating you was cruel and unnecessary." The guard shifted her weight. "For what it's worth, I don't think you're a criminal. I think you're just someone who got dealt a shit hand. That's more than most people here think." "Yeah, well, most people here haven't spent time in the southern packs. I have. I know what they're like." She paused. "My name's Iris. If you need anything, within reason, let me know." It was the first kindness anyone had shown her that didn't come with conditions attached. "Thank you," Lyra said again. Iris left, closing the door with a softer click than the others had used. Lyra spent the rest of the day with Era, relearning her daughter's sounds and movements, checking obsessively to make sure she was all right. The nursery had taken good care of her. Era was cleaner than she'd ever been, wearing clothes that actually fit, wrapped in blankets that were soft and warm. But she'd cried for her mother. That had to count for something. The next day, Draven came. He arrived without warning, dismissing Iris with a gesture and closing the door behind him. The room felt smaller with him in it, his presence taking up space that wasn't just physical. "You have 2 days," he said without preamble. "Marcus arrives tomorrow evening. The hearing is the following morning." Lyra adjusted Era in her arms. "I know. I need to prepare you. The council is going to ask questions you won't want to answer. They're going to push for details. And Marcus is going to be there, watching, ready to contradict everything you say." "I understand." "Do you?" Draven moved closer, his expression hard. "Because this isn't just about proving you didn't steal anything or assault anyone. This is about standing in front of people who already don't trust you and convincing them that a beta from an established pack is lying. That goes against every instinct they have about pack hierarchy and honor. So what am I supposed to do? Just give up? No, you're supposed to be smart about this." He pulled a chair over and sat, which somehow made the conversation feel more intense rather than less. "Tell me about Marcus. Not the version you told me in the cell, the real version. What kind of man is he?" Lyra's throat tightened. "Cruel. Controlling. He likes power, likes making people submit, especially Omegas. Has he done this before? Forced bonds? I don't know for certain, But there were rumors about his previous Omega. She died young, childbirth complications, supposedly. But people whispered. What did they whisper? That she'd tried to leave him, that the complications weren't natural. Lyra met his eyes. But no one investigated. No one cared enough to ask questions. Draven's jaw tightened. And when he came for you, what happened? The memory rose up, sharp and bitter. The pack had announced the bond. I'd refused privately, but they went ahead anyway, thinking I'd fall in line once it was official. Marcus came to my family's house the night before the ceremony, said he wanted to get to know his future Omega. Your family let him in? My father practically shoved me at him, told me to be gracious, to make a good impression. Lyra's hands clenched around Era. Marcus waited until we were alone. Then he told me exactly what he expected, how I'd behave, how I'd submit, how he'd train me if I didn't comply naturally. He put his hands on me, tried to... Stop. Draven's voice was rough. I understand. I fought back. Broke his nose, actually. Kicked him hard enough that he limped for a week. A bitter smile crossed Lyra's face. He told everyone I'd attacked him unprovoked, that I was unstable, violent. My own family believed him over me. And the pack alpha? Ren didn't care. He needed Marcus's alliance more than he needed to believe in Omega. So he gave me the choice, submit or leave. Draven was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable. Marcus is going to use that against you. He's going to paint you as violent, unstable. He'll say the assault charge is justified. I know. Then you need to be ready to turn it around. Make him prove his version. Make him explain why a man twice your size, with beta strength, has a broken nose from an unprovoked attack by an Omega who was half-starved at the time. Lyra hadn't thought about it that way. You think the council will listen? I think if you make them see the inconsistencies, if you stay calm while Marcus gets defensive, you have a chance. He stood, moving to the window. But you need to understand something. Even if you prove he's lying, even if you convince the council, there are still going to be people here who don't want you, who see you as a threat or a burden or just an inconvenience. I've dealt with that my whole life. Not like this. This pack is built on strength, on proving your worth through action. You're going to have to show them you belong here, and that's going to be harder than any hearing. I saved your son, Lyra said, anger flaring. Isn't that proof enough? For me? Yes. For them? Draven turned to face her. They see an Omega who was in the right place at the right time. They see someone who might have orchestrated the whole thing to gain leverage. I don't believe that, but they do. That's insane. I was dying out there. I had nothing, which makes you desperate. And desperate people do desperate things. He crossed his arms. I'm not saying it's fair. I'm saying it's reality. You want to stay here? You want protection for your daughter? Then you need to make yourself valuable beyond the life debt. Lyra stared at him. How? That's what you need to figure out, because once this hearing is over, once the Marcus situation is resolved, the life debt is fulfilled, and then you're just another person asking for a place in my pack. His expression softened slightly. I'll honor the debt. I'll make sure you and Era are protected, but you'll be fighting for acceptance every day after that. He left without another word. Lyra sat in the silence, Era dozing in her arms, and tried to process what he'd said. Make herself valuable. Prove she belonged. She was an Omega with no pack, no skills beyond basic survival, no resources. What could she possibly offer that would make a pack like this want to keep her? The answer came to her slowly, built from fragments of memory and observation. The Northern Pack was strong, powerful, but they were also isolated. Draven had said they built their laws on choice, on protecting Omegas from forced bonds. That meant they were different from the Southern Packs, fundamentally, structurally different, which meant they needed people who understood how the South operated, people who could navigate those politics, who knew how alphas like Ren thought and planned, people like her. She'd spent her whole life learning to read pack dynamics, to understand power structures, to predict what alphas would do before they did it. It had been survival. But maybe it could be more than that. Maybe it could be useful. The idea was barely formed, fragile and uncertain, but it was something, a direction, a possibility. Lyra held on to it like a lifeline. The next day crawled by. Iris brought meals, stayed to chat when her shift allowed. She talked about the pack, about life in the North, about Draven's leadership. He's hard but fair, Iris said, leaning against the doorframe. Doesn't tolerate disrespect, but doesn't demand submission either. You earn your place here through what you contribute, not what designation you were born with. And Omegas? How are they treated? Better than in the South, that's for damn sure. We've got Omegas in leadership positions, combat roles, advisory councils. Draven's mother was an Omega. Did he tell you that? He mentioned it. Then you know why he's so strict about consent and choice. He saw what forced bonds do, what they cost. Iris shifted her weight. That's why half the council is losing their minds over you. They see you as proof that the South is still doing what it's always done, and they want to help. The other half thinks you're a plant, a trick, something that's going to blow up in their faces. And you, what do you think? Iris smiled. I think you broke a beta's nose for trying to force you. That takes guts. I think anyone who survives 3 weeks in winter with a baby is tougher than most of our warriors. And I think if you were a spy, you'd be a lot better at playing the victim. It was the closest thing to a vote of confidence Lyra had received. Thank you, she said quietly. Don't thank me yet. Thank me after you survive tomorrow. Marcus arrived at sunset, a small convoy of vehicles announcing his presence. Lyra watched from her barred window as they pulled into the courtyard as a man she recognized too well stepped out of the lead vehicle. He looked exactly the same. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that would be handsome if not for the coldness in his eyes. He moved with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no, or who'd made sure anyone who tried didn't try twice. Lyra's hands shook as she backed away from the window. Era was sleeping in the bassinet, unaware of the danger. Unaware that the man who'd tried to own her mother was now less than 100 yards away. He can't hurt you here, Lyra whispered to herself. Draven won't let him. But Draven had also said he couldn't rule through force alone. If the council decided to side with Marcus, if the evidence was convincing enough. Lyra pushed the thought away. She couldn't afford to spiral. Not now. She spent the evening pacing, rehearsing what she'd say, trying to anticipate every question they might ask. When Iris brought dinner, Lyra could barely eat. He's here, Iris said unnecessarily. Caused quite a scene demanding to see you immediately. Draven told him the hearing is tomorrow and not a moment sooner. How did Marcus react? About how you'd expect. Lots of posturing about disrespect and diplomatic protocol. Draven just stared at him until he shut up. Iris grinned. It was beautiful. Despite everything, Lyra felt a small smile tug at her lips. I wish I could have seen that. You'll see plenty tomorrow. The hearing is open. Pack members can attend if they want. It's going to be crowded. Perfect. An audience for her humiliation. Lyra didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed, listening to Era's soft breathing, and tried to prepare herself for what was coming. Dawn broke cold and clear. Iris arrived early with clothes, not the worn rags Lyra had been wearing, but simple, clean garments that fit properly. A shirt, pants, boots that didn't have holes. Draven's orders, Iris explained, said you should look like you belong here, not like a refugee. Lyra dressed carefully, her hands surprisingly steady. She fed Era, changed her, wrapped her in a clean blanket. The nursery staff had offered to keep her during the hearing, but Lyra had refused. If they were going to judge her, they'd judge her as what she was, a mother fighting for her child. 2 guards came to escort her. Iris and a man named Thorn, who didn't speak but didn't look hostile either. They led her through corridors she hadn't seen before, upstairs and through passages, until they reached a large set of double doors. Beyond them, she could hear voices. Lots of voices. Ready? Iris asked. Lyra wasn't, but she nodded anyway. The doors opened and the noise hit her like a wave. The council chamber was massive, circular, with tiered seating rising up on all sides. The center was an open floor, empty except for 2 chairs facing each other across a small table. Above, on a raised platform, sat the council. 7 people, a mix of designations and ages, all watching with expressions that ranged from curious to hostile. And at the very top, in a chair that was definitely a throne in everything but name, sat Draven. His eyes found hers immediately. He gave the smallest nod. Then his gaze shifted, and Lyra followed it to the other chair in the center. Marcus sat there, perfectly composed, wearing formal attire that probably cost more than everything Lyra had ever owned. He looked relaxed, confident, like this was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. When he saw her, his expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did, a flash of satisfaction, of vindication. He thought he'd already won. "Come forward," one of the council members called out, the older man who'd confronted her in her room. His name was Garrett, she'd learned. He was Draven's second, and he clearly didn't trust her. Lyra walked to the empty chair, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. She sat, adjusted Era in her arms, and waited. Garrett stood. "We're gathered to address charges brought by Alpha Marcus Wren of Southern Ridge Pack against Lyra Thorne, currently residing in our territory under claim of life debt protection. The charges are theft of pack property, assault of a pack member, and unlawful abandonment of pack responsibility. Marcus Dane, Beta of Southern Ridge Pack and representative of Alpha Wren, is here to present evidence. Lyra Thorne will have opportunity to respond." He sat. Another council member, a woman with sharp features, stood. "Marcus Dane, you may begin." Marcus rose smoothly. He didn't look at Lyra. Instead, he addressed the council directly, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. "Thank you for hearing this matter. I'll be direct. Lyra Thorne is a criminal who fled lawful pack authority to avoid consequences for her actions. The theft charge relates to personal items belonging to her family, jewelry, clothing, supplies, taken without permission when she left. The assault charge stems from an unprovoked attack on myself when I attempted to speak with her about her upcoming bond ceremony. The abandonment charge relates to her refusal to fulfill pack responsibilities and her desertion of her family during a difficult time." He pulled out a tablet, held it up. "I have statements from her family, from pack members who witnessed the assault, from the pack alpha himself. All of this supports what I'm telling you." Lyra's stomach dropped. Statements, evidence, things she couldn't contradict because she'd been alone when most of it happened. "Furthermore," Marcus continued, "I believe Lyra came to your territory specifically to exploit your alpha's well-known protection of Omegas. She staged a rescue of his son to gain leverage, knowing he'd be honor-bound to offer protection. It's a calculated manipulation." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Lyra saw heads nodding, faces hardening. "These are serious accusations," the councilwoman said. "Do you have proof of this conspiracy?" "The timing is suspect. A Omega with no survival skills, no supplies, somehow manages to not only stay alive in the worst winter in decades, but also happens to be in exactly the right place to find the Alpha's lost son." Marcus's expression was reasonable, logical. "That's not luck, that's planning." More murmurs, louder now. Lyra wanted to stand, to shout that it wasn't true, but Iris's hand on her shoulder kept her seated. "Not yet," Iris whispered. "Let him finish. Let him get comfortable." Marcus was warming up now, his confidence growing. "I understand your alpha feels he owes a life debt. That's admirable. But life debts are void when the rescued party's actions were part of a larger deception. Lyra Thorne is not a victim. She's a criminal who's very good at playing one." He sat down, looking satisfied. The chamber erupted in conversation. The council let it go for a moment before Garrett called for silence. "Lyra Thorne," he said, "you've heard the charges and the accusation of conspiracy. What do you have to say?" Lyra stood on shaking legs. Every eye in the room was on her. Marcus was watching with that same satisfied expression. The council looked skeptical at best. She took a breath. "Most of what Marcus said is a lie," she began, keeping her voice steady. "But not all of it. So let me separate truth from fiction." She met Marcus's eyes directly. "It's true I took items when I left Southern Ridge Pack. They were my clothes, my personal belongings, things that belonged to me. My family now claims they were pack property because they're trying to justify the exile. If this council wants to investigate that, I welcome it. Ask them to produce receipts, proof of ownership. They won't be able to because those items were mine." A council member made a note. "The assault charge," Lyra continued, "is where it gets interesting. Marcus says I attacked him unprovoked, so let me ask him a question." She turned fully to face him. "Why would an Omega attack a Beta twice her size for no reason? What possible motivation would I have?" Marcus's expression didn't change. "You were unstable. Refusing the bond had made you irrational. Irrational enough to attack someone who could kill me with one hand? That's your explanation?" Lyra shifted Era to her other arm. "Or is the truth that you came to my home uninvited, cornered me alone, and put your hands on me when I refused to submit? That I fought back and broke your nose, and you've been trying to punish me for it ever since? That's a lie, Marcus said flatly. Then explain the nose. Explain how an irrational Omega managed to land a hit that required medical treatment. Explain why you didn't have me arrested immediately if I was so dangerous. The Pack Alpha showed mercy. The Pack Alpha didn't want a scandal before the bond ceremony. He wanted to sweep it under the rug, and when I refused to cooperate, when I got pregnant by someone I actually chose, he used that as an excuse to exile me. Lyra's voice was rising now, emotion bleeding through. You want to talk about abandonment? I was abandoned. By my pack, by my family, by every person who should have protected me. So yes, I left. Because staying meant submitting to a man who'd already shown me exactly what he was. The chamber was silent. Marcus stood slowly. You're very good at playing the victim, but the facts remain. You stole, you assaulted, you fled, and now you're trying to manipulate this pack the same way you manipulated your way into relevance back home. I manipulated nothing. I found a lost child in a storm and saved him because it was the right thing to do. Convenient that the child belonged to an alpha known for protecting omegas. I didn't know who he was. Lyra's control snapped. I didn't know anything except that a kid was dying in the cold, and I was the only one who could help. I was dying myself, starving, freezing, with an infant who wasn't going to last another day. Saving Kael used energy I didn't have. It risked drawing attention I couldn't afford. I did it anyway because some of us actually care about something beyond ourselves. Marcus's mask slipped for just a second. Anger flashed across his face, real anger, the kind that came from being challenged. You expect us to believe you're some kind of selfless hero? You, who abandoned her own family? My family abandoned me first. They chose pack politics over their own daughter. Because you were selfish, ungrateful. You had a good bond offered. I had a rapist offered, and I said no. That's not selfish. That's survival. The word hung in the air like a bomb. Marcus went very still. That is a serious accusation. It's the truth. You tried to force yourself on me. I fought back. Everything else is just you trying to rewrite what happened. Do you have proof? Do you? You claim all these witnesses, all this evidence. Produce it. Show the council these statements you supposedly have. Lyra looked at the council. Ask him to prove his version. Ask him why, if I'm so violent and dangerous, my own family never reported any prior incidents. Ask him why the Pack Alpha, if I was such a threat, didn't have me imprisoned instead of exiled. Garrett stood. Marcus Dane, do you have the statements you mentioned? Marcus pulled out his tablet again. They're here. Documented, signed. By people who have every reason to lie, Lyra interrupted. By my family who chose pack alliances over truth. By pack members who were told what to say. None of them are neutral witnesses. And you are? Marcus shot back. You're the accused. Your word is worthless. Then let's find a neutral witness. Someone who has no stake in this. Lyra looked up at Draven. Your son, Kael. He spent time with me. He saw how I acted, how I treated him. Ask him if I seemed like someone planning manipulation or someone just trying to survive. Murmurs erupted again. Bringing a child into this was unexpected. Draven's expression was unreadable. For a long moment, Lyra thought he'd refuse. Then he stood. Bring Kael, he ordered. Marcus's face went pale. You can't be serious. A child's testimony has value, Draven said coldly, especially when that child is mine. Unless you'd like to argue that my son is incompetent to observe basic human behavior? Marcus shut his mouth. 10 minutes later, Kael was brought in, looking nervous but determined. He climbed to the witness area, a small platform to the side, and looked around with wide eyes. Kael, Draven said gently, tell the council what happened the day you got lost. Kael took a breath. I got separated from the pack during the storm. I tried to find everyone, but I couldn't. I was really cold and scared. Then I heard Lyra calling out. She found me under a tree and helped me to a cabin. She built a fire even though she was really tired, and she kept me warm, and she didn't leave even though she had her baby to worry about. Did she seem like she was trying to use you? One of the council members asked. What? No, she seemed like she was trying not to die. She was really thin and she moved like everything hurt, but she still helped me. Kael looked at Lyra. She saved my life. Did she ask you anything about your father, about the pack? Not really. I told her dad was the alpha because I was proud. She actually looked kind of scared when I said it, like she didn't want to know. Marcus stood. The child is biased. The child, Draven said, his voice dropping to something dangerous, is telling the truth. Sit down, Marcus. It wasn't a suggestion. Marcus sat. The council conferred among themselves in low voices. Lyra stood there, Era getting fussy in her arms, and tried to read their expressions. Finally, Garrett stood. We find the evidence inconclusive. The charges, as presented, cannot be definitively proven, and the accuser's motivations are questionable given the context provided. He looked at Marcus. Unless you have additional evidence beyond statements from biased parties, this council sees no reason to pursue the matter further. Marcus's jaw tightened. Alpha Ren will not be pleased. Alpha Ren can bring his concerns to me directly, Draven said. This hearing is concluded. The life debt stands. Lyra Thorne and her daughter remain under my protection. He stood, and the formality of the gesture made it clear. The decision was final. Marcus looked at Lyra with something that went beyond anger. It was hatred, pure and simple. This isn't over, he said quietly, just loud enough for her to hear. Yes, Lyra said, it is. She turned and walked out of the chamber, Iris and Thorne flanking her, and didn't look back. The corridor outside was empty. Lyra made it 10 steps before her legs gave out. Iris caught her before she hit the ground. I've got you. You did it. You won. But Lyra wasn't sure she'd won anything. She'd survived, again, but Marcus's parting words echoed in her head. This isn't over. And she believed him. Iris helped her back to her quarters, one hand steady on Lyra's elbow, while Thorne walked ahead clearing the path. Pack members lined the corridors, their faces a mix of curiosity and judgment, whispering behind their hands as she passed. Keep your head up, Iris murmured. Don't let them see you shake. Lyra forced her spine straight, forced herself to meet the eyes that watched her. Some looked away. Others stared harder, measuring her like she was a problem they hadn't figured out how to solve yet. When they reached her room, Lyra collapsed onto the bed the moment the door closed. Era, sensing her mother's distress, began to cry. Not the hungry cry or the uncomfortable cry, but the one that meant she knew something was wrong. I'm okay, baby, Lyra whispered, even though she wasn't sure it was true. We're okay, but Marcus's words kept looping through her mind. This isn't over. He'd said it with such certainty, such cold promise. He hadn't gotten what he wanted today, but men like Marcus didn't just give up. They waited. They planned. They found another angle. A knock on the door made her tense. Iris opened it, and Draven stepped inside. He looked at Iris. Give us the room. Iris hesitated, glancing at Lyra, who nodded. The guard left, pulling the door shut behind her. Draven stood there for a moment, studying Lyra with an expression she couldn't read. Then he pulled the chair over and sat. That was reckless, he said finally, calling him a rapist in front of the entire council. It was the truth. Truth doesn't matter if you can't prove it. You got lucky that Kael's testimony supported your version. If it hadn't, but it did. Lyra adjusted Era, who was starting to calm. And now Marcus looks like exactly what he is. A liar trying to cover his ass. To some people, yes. To others, you just look desperate and willing to say anything to save yourself. Draven leaned back. The council voted to dismiss the charges, but it was 4-3. That's not a mandate. That's barely a majority. Lyra's stomach sank. So I haven't won anything. You've won time. Marcus left an hour ago, furious and empty-handed. Ren will hear about this, and he won't be happy. But you're still here, and the life debt still stands. He paused. That's not nothing. This is also not enough. Lyra looked down at Era, who was dozing in her arms. You said the debt would be fulfilled after the hearing. So what happens now? Do I just wait for the next person to challenge my right to be here? No. Now you prove you belong. How? I'm an Omega with no skills, no... Stop! Draven's voice was sharp. You survived 3 weeks in winter with an infant. You built fire with your bare hands. You saved my son when you had every reason to save your energy for yourself. Those are skills. The question is whether you can translate them into something this pack values. Lyra stared at him. What are you saying? I'm saying you need a role, a purpose beyond being the Omega I'm protecting out of obligation. He stood, moved to the window. This pack respects contribution. You want them to stop seeing you as a burden? Show them what you can do. Like what? I'm not a warrior. I can't fight. There are other ways to contribute. We need people who understand Southern Pack politics, people who can read situations, predict moves, navigate alliances. He turned to face her. You did that your whole life just to survive. Do it here and make yourself valuable. The idea she'd had before the hearing came back, stronger now. You want me to be an advisor. I want you to be whatever you can be that helps this pack. Draven's expression was serious. But I need to be clear about something. I can protect you from external threats. I can honor the life debt. What I can't do is make the pack accept you. That's on you. You'll have to earn it every single day, and some people will never come around no matter what you do. I understand. Do you? Because this won't be easy. You'll be questioned, tested, pushed. Some of it will be legitimate challenge. Some will be people trying to break you because they don't like what you represent. Lyra thought about her old pack, about the years of being told to submit, to accept, to be grateful for whatever scraps of dignity they allowed her. She thought about Marcus's hands on her family's turned backs, the cold certainty that she was worth less because of what she was born as. She thought about Era, sleeping peacefully because for the first time in her life she was warm and fed and safe. I've been tested my whole life, Lyra said quietly. This is just a different kind of test. Draven studied her for a long moment. All right, then let's start tomorrow. I'm assigning you to work with Sarah in administration. She handles pack communications, alliance management, diplomatic correspondence. She'll teach you the basics, and you'll show her what you know about Southern Pack dynamics. Sarah? From processing? She voted in your favor at the hearing, barely, and with reservations, but she sees potential. He moved toward the door. Don't waste it. He left without waiting for a response. Lyra sat in the sudden silence and tried to process what had just happened. She had a role, a purpose, a chance to prove herself beyond just surviving. It was more than she'd dared hope for. It was also terrifying. The next morning came too early. Iris arrived with breakfast and clean clothes, actual work clothes this time, practical and well-made. Heard you're joining administration, Iris said as Lyra ate. That's a good assignment. Sarah's tough but fair. She doesn't suffer fools, but if you show competence, she'll respect it. And if I don't? Then you'll be back to square one. Except now everyone will know you failed. Iris's expression was sympathetic. No pressure. Lyra fed Era, changed her, and tried to calm the anxiety churning in her stomach. She'd never done anything like this. Administration? Diplomacy? She'd spent her life trying to stay invisible, to avoid drawing attention. Now she was walking straight into the center of pack politics. The nursery staff came to collect Era mid-morning. Lyra had been told she could keep her daughter during work hours if needed, but she'd made the choice to use the nursery instead. Era needed consistency, needed proper care, needed more than what Lyra could provide while trying to learn a new role. Still, handing her over felt like tearing off skin. We'll take good care of her, the older woman said gently. You can visit during breaks, and we'll send for you if she needs you. Lyra nodded, not trusting her voice. The administration building was in the western section of the stronghold, a smaller structure but organized with military precision. Sarah's office was on the second floor, a space that was somehow both cluttered and perfectly ordered. Sarah looked up when Lyra entered. You're on time. Good. Sit. Lyra sat. I voted to dismiss the charges, Sarah said without preamble. Not because I trust you, but because Marcus Dane is a piece of shit, and I've dealt with enough Southern Pack politics to recognize a setup when I see one. She pulled out a stack of papers. That doesn't mean I think you're competent. It means I think you deserve a chance to prove it. Understood? This is correspondence from the last month. Requests for alliance meetings, trade negotiations, diplomatic complaints, intelligence reports. Sarah pushed the stack across the desk. I want you to read through them and identify patterns. Tell me what you see. Lyra picked up the first letter. It was from a mid-sized pack to the east requesting a meeting to discuss border disputes. The language was formal, careful, but there was something off about the phrasing. She read through several more, her mind automatically cataloging details, cross-referencing information, looking for connections the way she'd learned to read pack dynamics growing up. After an hour, she looked up. 3 of these letters are from packs that claim to be independent, but they're using identical phrasing in their requests. That's not coincidence. Someone's coordinating them. Sarah's eyebrows rose slightly. Go on. The border dispute requests all mention the same section of territory, Northern Ridge near the old trading post. That area hasn't been contested in years according to these older reports. So why now? Lyra tapped one of the letters. Someone's trying to create a unified front, make it look like multiple packs have concerns, but it's orchestrated. And who benefits from that? Lyra thought about it, piecing together what she knew about pack politics, about power moves and territorial games. Someone who wants to weaken your position, make it look like the Northern Pack is causing problems for multiple neighbors, build a case for intervention or sanctions. Someone like Ren. The name tasted bitter. He's been trying to expand south for years, but he needs justification. If he can make it look like you're the aggressor, like multiple packs are concerned about your expansion, he can position himself as a peacekeeper while actually grabbing territory. Sarah sat back in her chair, her expression unreadable. I came to the same conclusion 2 days ago. It took me a week of analysis. You did it in an hour. I grew up watching this kind of maneuvering. You learn to see the patterns when your survival depends on it. Apparently, Sarah pulled out another folder. Here's the situation. We know Ren is coordinating this, but we can't prove it without exposing our intelligence sources. We need a counter strategy that doesn't reveal what we know. Reach out to the packs individually, Lyra said immediately, not to respond to their letters, but to offer something they actually want. Trade agreements, resource sharing, security cooperation. Make it clear that working with you is more valuable than whatever Ren is offering them to coordinate against you. That could backfire. Make us look desperate. Only if you approach it as defensive, frame it as expansion. You're strengthening regional ties, building a coalition. The fact that it undermines Ren's coordination is just a bonus. Lyra leaned forward. And do it publicly. Announce a regional summit. Invite all the packs. Ren can't coordinate in the shadows if everyone's meeting in the open. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled out a tablet and started making notes. That's not bad, she said finally. Risky, but not bad. I'll run it by the Alpha. Will he listen? If the idea has merit, yes. Draven doesn't care where good strategy comes from, only that it works. Sarah looked at Lyra with something that might have been respect. You might actually be useful. It was probably the best compliment Sarah knew how to give. Over the next week, Lyra fell into a routine that would have seemed impossible a month ago. Mornings in administration, learning the intricacies of pact diplomacy. Afternoons with Era, making up for the hours apart. Evenings studying reports and correspondence, building her understanding of the political landscape. It was exhausting, but it was also the first time she'd felt like something other than a victim or a burden. Sarah pushed her hard, testing her analysis, her recommendations, her ability to think strategically under pressure. Lyra pushed back when she disagreed, learned when to defer, started to develop a sense for the nuances of Northern Pack politics. The regional summit idea was approved. Invitations went out to 24 packs, and responses started coming back. Some positive, some cautiously interested, a few outright hostile. Ren's packs, Sarah explained, pointing to the hostile responses. The ones he's already got locked down. But look at these. She indicated a cluster of neutral responses. These are the ones we can flip. They're coordinating with Ren because they don't have better options. Give them one, and they'll switch. What do they need? Security, mostly. They're small packs, vulnerable to larger neighbors. Ren offers protection in exchange for loyalty. Sarah pulled up a map. But our territory borders 3 of them. We could offer the same protection more credibly. Lyra studied the map, her mind working. What if we offer them something better than protection? What if we offer them autonomy? Explain. Ren's protection comes with strings. He controls them. What if we offer a defense pact that preserves their independence? They govern themselves. We provide mutual defense. It's protection without submission. Sarah's expression shifted. That could work. It plays to our strengths, the Northern Pact's reputation for respecting autonomy, and it makes Ren's offer look exactly like what it is, control dressed up as protection. They worked on the proposal together, refining the language, anticipating objections. When they presented it to Draven that evening, he read through it in silence. This is good, he said finally. Smart positioning, clear benefits, hard to argue against. He looked at Lyra. This was your idea? Sarah and I developed it together. Don't be modest. Sarah already told me it originated with you. Draven set down the tablet. We'll lead with this at the summit. Well done. It was simple praise, but it hit harder than Lyra expected. She'd done something valuable, something that mattered beyond just surviving. The pack noticed. Over the following days, Lyra felt the shift in how people looked at her. Still wary, still measuring, but not quite as hostile. Word had spread that she was working in administration, that she'd contributed to the summit strategy. It didn't win everyone over. There were still whispers, still people who saw her as an outsider who'd manipulated her way into favor, but there were also people who nodded at her in the corridors now, who asked her opinion in meetings, who treated her like she belonged. Iris noticed the change too. You're doing it, she said one evening, bringing dinner to Lyra's quarters, making them see you as more than just the Omega Dravens protecting. Some of them, maybe. That's how it starts. You don't need everyone's approval, just enough people seeing your value that the others can't dismiss you easily. Lyra fed Era, who was getting bigger, stronger, more alert. Her daughter smiled now, real smiles that lit up her whole face. She was hitting developmental milestones, catching up to where she should be. She's thriving, Marcus the medic had said during the last checkup. Healthy weight gain, good responsiveness. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. What Lyra was doing was finally having enough. Enough food, enough rest, enough support. It turned out that when you weren't constantly fighting to survive, you could actually care for a baby properly. The summit was scheduled for 3 weeks out. Preparations consumed the administration building, logistics, security, protocol, dozens of details that all had to be perfect. Lyra found herself in the middle of it, coordinating with Sarah, liaising with security teams, reviewing diplomatic protocols. She was good at it, she realized. Good at seeing the connections, at anticipating problems, at finding solutions that satisfied multiple competing interests. She was also learning about Draven's pack in ways she hadn't expected. The Northern Territories weren't the savage wasteland she'd been taught to fear. They were organized, efficient, built on principles that actually made sense. Choice over coercion, contribution over designation, competence over birthright. It wasn't perfect. No pack was. But it was better than what she'd left behind. Kyle visited sometimes, usually when he was supposed to be doing something else. He'd appear in the administration building with some excuse about needing to deliver a message, then spend 20 minutes talking to Lyra about his training or his studies or whatever was on his mind. You're different now, he said one afternoon. More, I don't know, more like you belong here. Do I? Yeah. Before you looked like you were waiting for someone to kick you out. Now you just look busy. He grinned. Dad says you're good at your job. That's high praise from him. Your dad said that? Well, he said you demonstrate unexpected competence in administrative analysis, which is basically dad speak for good at your job. Lyra laughed despite herself. I'll take it. The day before the summit, everything went to hell. Lyra was in Sarah's office reviewing the final seating arrangements when Thorne burst through the door. We've got a problem, he said. Marcus Dane just arrived at the gates. Lyra's blood went cold. He's supposed to be in Southern Territory. Ren wasn't invited to the summit. He's not here for the summit. He's claiming diplomatic immunity, says he has information critical to the Northern Pact's security. Thorne looked grim. The Alpha is meeting with him now. Sarah and Lyra exchanged glances. That's not good, Sarah said. Marcus wouldn't come back here unless he had something big, something he thinks will undermine the summit. Or undermine me, Lyra said quietly. Either way, we need to know what he's telling Draven. Sarah stood. Come on. They made it to the main hall just as raised voices started echoing from behind the closed doors of Draven's office. Lyra recognized Marcus's voice, smooth and persuasive even through the thick wood. Irresponsible to proceed with the summit when you're harboring a security threat. Lyra Thorne was cleared of your charges. That was Draven, his voice cold. Not those charges. New information has come to light. Information about who she really is. Lyra's stomach dropped. Sarah grabbed her arm. What is he talking about? I don't know. The door opened. Draven stood there, his expression carved from stone. Behind him, Marcus wore that same satisfied smile he'd had at the first hearing. Lyra, Draven said. Inside. Now. She walked in on shaking legs. The door closed behind her with a finality that made her skin crawl. Marcus has made some interesting claims, Draven said. I think you should hear them directly. Marcus pulled out a tablet. Your Omega hasn't been entirely honest with you. Her real name isn't Lyra Thorne. Yes, it is. It's Lyra Thorne Blackwater, daughter of Elena Blackwater, who was the sister of the last alpha of the Blackwater Pack. He turned the tablet to show a genealogy chart. The Blackwater Pack controlled the Northern Territories 50 years ago, before they were overthrown and scattered. Elena married into Southern Ridge to escape the Purge, changed her name, hid her heritage. Lyra stared at the chart, her mind reeling. Her mother's maiden name had been Blackwater, but she'd never known why the name change mattered. Her mother had never talked about it. So what, she managed. That's ancient history. Is it? Marcus's smile widened. The Blackwater Pack had a claim to these territories, a claim that passes through bloodlines, which means you, Lyra Thorne Blackwater, have a legal right to challenge for Northern Pack leadership. The room spun. That's insane, Lyra said. I've never wanted. Doesn't matter what you want. The law is clear. Bloodline claims supersede pack structure. Marcus looked at Draven. Which means she's not just some desperate Omega you saved. She's a legitimate threat to your authority. Draven's expression was unreadable. Get out, Marcus. I'm just delivering information that... Get out. Marcus left, still smiling. The silence in the office was suffocating. Did you know? Draven asked finally. No. I knew my mother's maiden name was Blackwater, but she never told me why it mattered. She never talked about her family, about the North. I just thought it was a name. And if you had known? Would you have told me? Lyra met his eyes. Yes, because I don't want your pack. I don't want leadership or power or any of that. I just want my daughter to be safe. People will say you manipulated your way here to position yourself for a claim. I know. The council will demand an investigation. Some will call for your exile regardless of the life debt. I know that too. Draven moved to the window, staring out at his territory. There's a way through this. If you formally renounce any claim to leadership, if you swear loyalty to the Northern Pack under my authority, the legal threat disappears. Then I'll do it. It's not that simple. A formal renunciation requires a ceremony, witnesses, the full council present, and it has to be your choice, completely voluntary, no coercion. He turned to face her. If anyone claims I forced you to renounce, the whole thing becomes invalid and we're back where we started. No one's forcing me. I'm choosing this. Tomorrow, in front of everyone at the summit, that's when you'll have to do it. In front of 24 packs, in front of Marcus and anyone else waiting for you to slip up. Draven's expression was serious. Can you handle that? Lyra thought about everything she'd survived. The exile, the winter, the hearing. She thought about the work she'd done over the past weeks. The value she'd created, the place she'd started to build for herself and Era. She thought about Marcus's smug face, convinced he'd found the weapon that would destroy her. And she felt something shift inside her, not fear, not desperation, but something harder, angrier, more determined. Yes, she said, I can handle it. The next morning, the summit hall was packed. Representatives from 23 packs filled the seats, their delegations crowding the space until it was standing room only. Lyra stood backstage with Sarah, listening to the murmur of voices, the speculation about why the Northern Alpha had called for an opening ceremony before the formal negotiations. You don't have to do this, Sarah said quietly. There are other ways to handle the situation. No, there aren't. This ends it cleanly. Lyra adjusted her clothes, formal attire that Sarah had provided, dark and well-made. Besides, I want to. I want everyone to see that I'm choosing this. Even Marcus? Especially Marcus. Draven stepped onto the stage and the hall went silent. His presence commanded attention, the way gravity commanded falling objects, absolute and undeniable. "Thank you all for coming," he said, his voice carrying easily. "Before we begin the formal summit proceedings, there's a matter of pack law that requires public resolution." Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Lyra Thorne, please come forward." Lyra walked onto the stage, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes. She saw Marcus in the third row, sitting with Wren's delegation. His expression was expectant, hungry. Draven turned to the assembly. "It's recently come to light that Lyra Thorne is descended from the Blackwater line, the former Northern Pack Alphas. Under traditional law, this gives her the right to challenge for leadership of the Northern Territories." The whispers became louder, some shocked, some intrigued, some angry. "However," Draven continued, "Lyra has chosen to formally renounce any such claim and swear loyalty to the Northern Pack under my leadership. This is her choice, made freely and without coercion. I've asked you here to witness it." He turned to Lyra. "Do you, Lyra Thorne Blackwater, renounce all claims to Northern Pack leadership derived from your bloodline?" Lyra took a breath. This was it. The moment that would define everything that came after. "I do," she said clearly. "I renounce all claims to leadership. My bloodline gives me no rights here beyond what any other pack member would have." "And do you swear loyalty to the Northern Pack, to contribute to its welfare, to abide by its laws, and to accept my authority as Alpha?" "I do." "Then by the authority vested in me as Northern Pack Alpha, I accept your oath." Draven's expression was formal, but there was something else there. Respect, maybe, or recognition. "You are no longer an outsider under protection. You are a member of this pack, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails." The hall erupted in noise, some applause, some angry protests, some just confused chatter. Marcus stood abruptly. "This is a farce. She's clearly being coerced." "Sit down, Marcus," a voice called from the back. Lyra couldn't see who, but several others echoed the sentiment. "The woman just gave up a legitimate leadership claim," another voice added. "That's not coercion, that's choice." Marcus's face darkened, but he sat. Draven gestured for silence. "The matter is resolved. Lyra Thorne is a member of the Northern Pack. Anyone who wishes to challenge this decision can take it up with me directly." The way he said it made it clear what kind of challenge he meant, the physical kind. No one moved. "Good. Let's begin the summit." Lyra walked off stage as the formal proceedings started, her legs shaking with adrenaline. Sarah met her in the wings. "You did it," Sarah said. "You actually did it." "Did I have a choice?" "Yes. You could have claimed the leadership right, challenged Draven, tried to take the pack. It would have failed, but you could have tried." Sarah's expression was serious. "Instead, you gave it up publicly. That takes either stupidity or integrity, and I don't think you're stupid. I don't want power, I just want a place to belong." "Yeah, I'm starting to get that." Sarah handed her a tablet. "Come on, we've got a summit to help run." The rest of the day was a blur of negotiations, side conversations, and careful diplomatic maneuvering. The Defense Pact proposal was well received by the smaller packs, exactly as Lyra had predicted. 3 of them signed preliminary agreements before the day was done. Wren's delegation looked frustrated. Marcus looked furious. By evening, when the formal sessions ended and delegations scattered to their accommodations, Lyra was exhausted but satisfied. They'd accomplished what they'd set out to do. Undermined Wren's coordination, built new alliances, positioned the Northern Pack as a stabilizing force rather than a threat. And she'd played a real role in making it happen. Draven found her in the administration office as she was finishing her notes on the day's proceedings. "You should be resting," he said. "So should you." He smiled slightly. "Fair point." He moved to the window, looking out at the stronghold. "What you did today, the renunciation, that wasn't easy. It was necessary. Still, you gave up something real, something that could have given you power." Lyra set down her tablet. "I've spent my whole life watching people chase power, watching them sacrifice everything, morals, relationships, basic decency, for it. My old Alpha, Marcus, even my own father, in his way." She looked at Draven. "That kind of power destroys people. I don't want it. What do you want?" It was the same question he'd asked before, but this time Lyra knew the answer. "I want to build something, not tear things down or control people or prove I'm better than everyone else. I want to contribute to something worth being part of." She paused. "I want Era to grow up in a place where her worth isn't determined by what she is, but by who she chooses to be. And I think I found that place." Draven was quiet for a long moment. "You know, this doesn't mean everyone will accept you now. The renunciation helps, but there are still going to be people who don't trust you." "I know, but there are also people who do. Iris, Sarah, Kael, you." Lyra met his eyes. "That's enough to start with." "Yes," Draven said, "it is." He left her to her work, but something had shifted between them. Not friendship exactly, they weren't there yet, but mutual respect, recognition. 2 days later, after the summit concluded and the delegations departed, Lyra received a message from the council. She was being officially assigned to the administration department, with a permanent position on the diplomatic advisory team. It came with quarters in the main residential building, a salary, and full pack member status. She'd done it. She'd gone from exile to belonging, from outcast to valued. That evening, Lyra stood in her new quarters, larger than before, with actual furniture and a proper space for Era, and felt something she hadn't felt in so long she'd almost forgotten what it was like. Hope. Not the desperate, fragile kind that could shatter at any moment, but real hope, built on solid ground, earned through her own efforts. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Kael standing there with a badly wrapped package. "What's this?" "A welcome gift." "Well, Dad said it's traditional when someone officially joins the pack, so..." He thrust the package at her. Lyra unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a small carved wooden toy. A wolf, beautifully detailed. "I made it," Kael said proudly. "Well, I had help, but I did most of it. For Era. So she has something that's from here, from the pack." Lyra felt her throat tighten. "Kael, this is beautiful. Do you think she'll like it?" "I think she'll love it." Lyra looked at the boy who'd inadvertently changed everything. "Thank you. For this and for everything. You saved my life," Kael said seriously. "That's way more important than a wooden toy. You saved mine too, just in a different way." After he left, Lyra placed the carved wolf next to Era's bassinet. Her daughter was sleeping peacefully, one tiny fist curled against her cheek. Outside the window, the northern territories stretched endlessly under a clear sky. Harsh, unforgiving, beautiful. Home. For the first time in her life, Lyra Thorne belonged somewhere. Not because of her bloodline or her designation or anyone else's decision, because she'd earned it. The word settled into Lyra's bones like truth finally finding its home. She stood at the window watching snow fall gently over the stronghold. Not the violent, killing kind she'd walked through weeks ago, but the peaceful kind that made everything look clean and new. Era stirred in the bassinet, making the small sounds that meant she'd wake soon. Lyra moved to her daughter, lifted her carefully, and carried her to the window. "Look," she whispered. "This is where we live now. This is home." Era's dark eyes focused on the falling snow, tracking the movement with the concentration only babies could manage. She was almost 5 months old now, healthy and growing, her cheeks round instead of hollow. A knock interrupted the moment. Lyra opened the door to find Iris holding a stack of files. "Sarah says you need to review these before the morning briefing. Something about the Eastern Pack Alliance wanting to renegotiate terms already." Iris rolled her eyes. 3 days after signing, and they're already pushing boundaries. Lyra took the files. "That's Pack Leader Morrison. He agreed too easily at the summit. I should have known he'd try to walk it back once he got home, and his council started questioning him." "You called that?" "Pattern recognition. Morrison's been alpha for less than a year. He's still proving himself to his own people. Any agreement he makes without their input, they'll challenge." Lyra shifted Era to her other arm. "Tell Sarah I'll have recommendations by morning." After Iris left, Lyra settled at the small desk in her quarters and opened the files, Era content in a sling against her chest. The work was familiar now, reading between the lines, identifying the real concerns beneath the diplomatic language, finding solutions that gave everyone enough to save face. She was good at this. Better than she'd expected. better than anyone had expected. The morning briefing was in Sarah's office at dawn. Lyra arrived with her analysis written up, her recommendations clear. Morrison's counsel wants him to renegotiate the defense commitment clause, she explained, pointing to the relevant section. They're worried we'll drag them into conflicts that don't serve their interests. It's a legitimate concern. They're small, vulnerable. A defense pact could mean fighting battles they can't afford. Sarah frowned. So we weaken the agreement? We make it more specific. Define what qualifies as a defensive action versus an offensive one. Add a consultation clause that requires both parties to agree before deploying forces. It gives them the protection they need without the open-ended commitment that scares their counsel. That sets a precedent. Every other pact will want the same terms. Good. Let them. It makes the agreement stronger, more sustainable. Lyra pulled up a comparison chart. Look at Ren's alliances. They're falling apart because they're all one-sided. He demands loyalty without giving real partnership. Our agreements work because they're actually mutual. Making them more specific only reinforces that. Sarah studied the proposal, her expression thoughtful. I'll take this to the Alpha, but I think it's solid. You think or you know? I know. Stop fishing for compliments. Lyra smiled. Over the past weeks, she and Sarah had developed a working relationship built on mutual respect and absolutely zero sentimentality. It was refreshing. The Alpha's approval came within the hour. Morrison's counsel received the revised terms that afternoon. By evening, they had accepted. 3 packs down, 5 more in negotiation, Sarah said that night, updating the alliance map. We're building something real here. An actual coalition based on mutual interest instead of coercion. And Ren's noticing. Oh, he's definitely noticing. Intelligence reports say he's furious. Lost 3 of his client packs in the last month. All of them approached us instead. Sarah's expression was grim, which means he's going to retaliate. Question is how and when. The answer came 2 weeks later. Lyra was in the nursery with Era when the alarm sounded, a deep, resonant bell that she'd been told meant external threat. She grabbed her daughter and ran for the residential building, following the emergency protocols she'd memorized. Iris met her in the corridor. Stay in your quarters, lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except me or the Alpha. What's happening? Ren's forces. They've crossed the border, claiming we violated territory agreements. It's bullshit, but they're armed and they're not backing down. Lyra's blood went cold. How many? Too many for this to be an accident. This is deliberate. Iris was already moving. Stay safe, I mean it. The next hours were agony. Lyra paced her quarters with Era, listening to distant sounds she couldn't identify, trying not to imagine the worst. She'd just found safety, just built something worth having. The thought of losing it to Ren's aggression made her want to scream. A knock on the door made her jump. It's me, Iris called. Lyra opened it. Iris looked exhausted but unhurt. Status? Standoff? Ren's forces are at the eastern border making demands. Draven's meeting with their commander now. Iris came inside, closed the door. But here's the thing. The demands don't make sense. They're claiming we attacked one of their patrols, but they can't provide evidence. They're claiming border violations we didn't commit. It's like they're manufacturing reasons for conflict. Lyra's mind raced. Because they are. This isn't about actual grievances. It's about creating justification for aggression. Ren needs an excuse to move against the Northern Territories, and he's building one. How do we prove that? We don't need to prove it. We need to make him prove his accusations. Lyra handed Era to Iris, moved to her desk, started pulling up files. If his claims are fabricated, he won't have real evidence. We call for neutral arbitration, force him to present his case in front of witnesses. That could backfire if he's prepared fake evidence. Then we prepare real evidence that contradicts it. Patrol logs, witness statements, surveillance data, everything that shows we've been exactly where we're supposed to be. Lyra was writing fast now, laying out the strategy. And we do it publicly. Invite the regional council, the packs from the summit, everyone. Make this about credibility, not just territorial disputes. Iris read over her shoulder. This is risky. Everything's risky. But sitting here waiting for Ren to dictate terms is worse. Lyra looked at her. I need to get this to Draven. He's in the command center. It's locked down. Then get me in. Iris hesitated, then nodded. Give me 10 minutes. She left with Era, promising to take her to the secure nursery. Lyra used the time to refine her proposal, anticipating objections, building the case. When Iris returned, she had 2 guards with her. They'll escort you. Don't make me regret this. The command center was in the stronghold's core, a heavily fortified room filled with monitors, maps, and grim-faced people coordinating the response. Draven stood at the center, his voice calm as he issued orders. He saw Lyra and his expression flickered. Surprise. Then something harder to read. This better be important, he said. Lyra handed him the tablet. Wren's manufacturing this conflict. His claims won't hold up to scrutiny. We need to call for neutral arbitration and force him to prove his accusations publicly. Draven read fast, his eyes scanning the proposal. This assumes he'll agree to arbitration. He will, because refusing makes him look like he's hiding something. And if he agrees, we control the narrative. And if he has fabricated evidence, then we expose it as fabricated. We have patrol logs, surveillance, witnesses. Our data is real. His isn't. Truth has a consistency that lies don't. Draven looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned to his second-in-command. Get me a secure line to the regional council head. We're requesting formal arbitration. The next 72 hours were a blur of preparation. Lyra worked alongside Sarah and the intelligence team, compiling every piece of evidence they had. Patrol routes, timestamps, witness statements from pack members who'd been at the border during the alleged violations. The picture that emerged was clear. The Northern Pack had been exactly where they were supposed to be. No border crossings, no attacks, no violations. If Wren's forces claimed otherwise, they were lying. The arbitration was set for neutral ground, a meeting hall maintained by the regional council for exactly these purposes. 3 neutral alphas would serve as arbiters, hearing evidence from both sides. Lyra wasn't allowed to attend. She wasn't officially part of the Northern Pack's leadership, and Wren's delegation had already objected to her presence. But she'd done her part. The evidence was compiled, the strategy set. Now she could only wait. Draven left with a small delegation, Sarah, Garrett, and 3 others. The stronghold felt empty without them, tense with anticipation. Lyra spent the time in the administration building, monitoring communications, coordinating with the intelligence team. Iris stayed close, providing updates when they came through. First session just ended, Iris reported on the second day. Wren presented his evidence, patrol logs claiming Northern Pack forces crossed into Southern territory on 3 separate occasions. And our response? Sarah's tearing it apart. The timestamps don't match satellite data. The locations are wrong. It's sloppy fabrication. Iris grinned. Apparently one of the alleged border crossings happened when our entire patrol was documented 40 miles away, responding to a weather emergency. Lyra felt a surge of satisfaction. They didn't expect us to have that level of documentation. No one does, but Draven's been obsessive about record-keeping since he took over. Said his father lost a territorial dispute because he couldn't prove where his forces were. He's never made that mistake. The second day of arbitration brought new developments. One of Wren's own patrol members broke ranks, admitted the logs were falsified on orders from command. The defection caused chaos. The arbiters are pissed, Iris reported, falsifying evidence to justify military action. That's not just a violation of protocol, it's grounds for sanctions. Wren's trying to do damage control, but it's not working. By the third day, the outcome was clear. The arbiters ruled unanimously in the Northern Pack's favor. No border violations had occurred. Wren's accusations were unfounded and his evidence falsified. The Southern forces were ordered to withdraw immediately. Furthermore, Wren's pack was sanctioned, trade restrictions, diplomatic censure, and a formal investigation into the falsified evidence. It was a complete vindication. When Draven's convoy returned that evening, the stronghold erupted in celebration. Pack members lined the courtyard, cheering as the vehicles pulled in. Lyra watched from the administration building, Era in her arms. She'd played a crucial role in this victory, but it wasn't hers to celebrate publicly. Not yet. Draven found her an hour later, after the initial celebrations had died down. That was your strategy, Imbo, he said without preamble. Calling for arbitration, forcing them to prove their claims. Sarah executed it, but you designed it. I helped. Don't be modest. It doesn't suit you. He moved to the window, looking out at his territory. We won because you saw the pattern, because you understood how to turn Ren's aggression against him. That's worth more than you realize. I just did what made sense. No, you did what someone who understands power does. You fought smart instead of hard. Draven turned to face her. The council wants to formalize your position, make you chief diplomatic advisor with a seat at strategy meetings. Lyra's breath caught. That's a leadership position. Yes. I renounced any claim to leadership. You renounced a bloodline claim to Pack Alpha. This is different. This is earned position based on competence and contribution. His expression was serious. But I need to know you want it, not because you think you owe me, not because you're trying to prove something, because you actually want to do the work. Did she want it? The responsibility, the pressure, the constant scrutiny that came with visible leadership? Lyra looked down at Era, who was dozing peacefully. A month ago, her daughter had been starving and freezing, with a mother who could barely keep them both alive. Now she was healthy, safe, surrounded by people who would protect her. And Lyra had helped build that safety. For Era, yes, but also for herself. For the pack. For something bigger than just survival. I want it, she said, not to prove anything, but because I'm good at it, and because this pack gave me something I never had before. I want to give back. Draven nodded. Then it's yours. The council votes tomorrow, but it's a formality. They know what you're worth. He left her with that. The knowledge that she'd gone from exile to leadership in less than 2 months. It should have felt impossible. Instead, it felt right. The council vote was unanimous. Lyra was officially appointed chief diplomatic advisor to the Northern Pack, with full authority over alliance negotiations, regional diplomacy, and strategic intelligence analysis. The ceremony was small but significant. She stood before the council, Draven at the center, and swore the same oath every pack leader swore. To serve with integrity, to put the pack's welfare above personal interest, to lead with wisdom and strength. When it was done, Garrett, who'd been one of her harshest critics, stepped forward and offered his hand. You've earned this, he said gruffly. Don't make us regret it. I won't. Over the following weeks, Lyra settled into her new role. It was demanding work, constant negotiations, crisis management, strategic planning, but she thrived on it. Every problem solved, every alliance strengthened, every threat neutralized, felt like proof that she belonged here. The pack noticed. Slowly, the whispers changed from suspicion to respect. People who'd once crossed the hall to avoid her now sought her advice. Warriors who'd dismissed her as just an Omega started treating her opinions as valuable. It wasn't universal. There were still people who resented her rise, who saw her as an outsider who'd gotten lucky. But their voices grew quieter as her track record grew stronger. Kyle visited regularly, proudly telling anyone who'd listened that Lyra was his friend. He'd started training with the junior warriors, and he'd show her his progress. New techniques, stronger forms, increasing confidence. Dad says when I'm older, I can join diplomatic missions, he told her one afternoon. Learn the political side too, not just combat. That's good. A strong alpha needs both. You think I'll be alpha someday? Lyra looked at the boy who'd inadvertently saved her life by being in the right place at the wrong time. I think you'll be whatever you choose to be. That's the whole point of what your father's building here. 3 months after the arbitration victory, Lyra received an unexpected visitor. A young woman appeared at the stronghold gates, escorted by Border Patrol. She was thin, exhausted, with the hollow-eyed look of someone who'd traveled far with limited resources. When Lyra saw her in the processing room, her heart stopped. Mara? Her younger sister looked up, and tears immediately started streaming down her face. Lyra! Oh God, Lyra! I found you! They stood there for a moment, neither quite believing the other was real. Then Mara was across the room, pulling Lyra into a desperate hug. I'm sorry, Mara sobbed. I'm so sorry I didn't fight for you. I should have said something, done something, but I was scared and I didn't know how, and It's okay, Mara. It's okay. It's not. You were exiled and I just watched and I hate myself for it. Mara pulled back, wiping her eyes. But I'm here now. I left. I told them I was done with a pack that treats people like property, and I came to find you. Lyra's throat tightened. You left the pack? Walked out 3 weeks ago. They tried to stop me, tried to arrange a bond to keep me there, but I ran. Mara's expression was fierce. You showed me it was possible. To choose yourself instead of submitting. I couldn't stay after that. Over the next hours, Mara told her story. How she'd watched Lyra's exile and realized the pack was wrong. How she'd started questioning everything she'd been taught. How she'd finally gathered the courage to leave when the pack tried to bond her to a beta she didn't know. I didn't have a plan, Mara admitted. I just knew I had to find you. People talked about the Northern Territories, about an Omega who'd become some kind of advisor to the Alpha. I hoped it was you. It is. I'm here. And you're safe now. Processing Mara as a new pack member took several days. But with Lyra's position and Mara's genuine desire to join, the path was smoother than it might have been. Watching her sister go through the same integration she'd experienced, the medical checks, the questioning, the slow acceptance, gave Lyra a strange sense of full circle. She'd been the desperate outsider. Now she was the established member helping someone else find their place. Mara thrived in the Northern Pack. She was younger, more adaptable, and hungry to prove herself. Within weeks, she'd joined the education program, started training with the junior warriors, made friends among the other young pack members. This place is nothing like home, she told Lyra one evening. People actually ask what you want instead of telling you. It's weird. Good weird or bad weird? Good. Definitely good. Mara paused. Do you ever regret it? Leaving everything behind? Lyra looked around her quarters, comfortable, warm, filled with evidence of the life she'd built. Era was asleep in her crib, healthy and happy. Through the window, she could see the stronghold lit against the evening darkness, bustling with purpose. No, she said honestly, I regret that it took exile to find this. But I don't regret leaving. Winter turned to spring. The snow melted, revealing the landscape beneath, harsh but beautiful, unforgiving but honest. The Northern Territories bloomed in their own way, different from the South, but no less alive. The alliance network Lyra had helped build was thriving. 8 packs now had formal agreements with the Northern Territories, with 3 more in negotiation. The regional balance of power had shifted, and Ren's influence was waning. Dejand, he tried twice more to undermine the Northern Pack, once through economic pressure, once through diplomatic maneuvering. Both attempts had failed, largely due to intelligence Lyra had gathered and strategies she'd designed. She'd become Ren's nightmare, the Omega who'd refused him, escaped him, and built a power base he couldn't touch. On Era's first birthday, the pack threw a celebration. It was a Northern tradition. First birthdays were considered significant, a marker of survival and resilience. The Great Hall was decorated, food prepared, pack members gathering to celebrate this child who'd survived impossible odds. Lyra stood at the edge of the celebration, watching Era toddle between friendly adults, laughing at the attention. Her daughter was walking now, babbling words that were almost language, full of personality and life. She's going to be trouble, Iris said, appearing beside her. I can already tell. Good. Trouble means she's not afraid to challenge things. Wonder where she gets that from. Draven approached, Kale trailing behind him. The boy immediately headed for Era, carefully helping her navigate toward the table of toys pack members had brought as gifts. A year ago, you were dying in the snow, Draven said quietly. Now you're one of my most valuable advisors. That's quite a transformation. A year ago, I was focused on surviving the next hour. Now I'm planning strategies for the next decade. It's surreal. Is it everything you hoped for when you crossed into my territory? Lyra thought about that moment, desperate, freezing, with nothing but her dying daughter and her determination to find something better. No, she said honestly. It's more. I hoped for safety. Maybe shelter. A place where Era could survive. She gestured at the celebration, at the pack members who now treated her as one of their own. I never imagined belonging. I never thought I'd find a place where I could actually contribute, where my voice mattered. Your voice matters because you made it matter. You could have been content with protection, with being the Omega I was honor-bound to shelter. Instead, you pushed yourself to be more. I had to, for Era. At first, maybe. But somewhere along the way, it became about you too. Admitting that isn't selfish, it's honest. Lyra met his eyes. You're right. I wanted to prove I was worth something beyond what I could give a pack through a forced bond or breeding. I wanted to prove I had value as myself. And did you? Yes. To everyone else. She paused. And finally, to myself. The celebration continued around them. Laughter, music, the warm chaos of pack life. Era shrieked with delight as Kyle showed her a wooden toy that made noise. Mara was across the room talking animatedly with other young pack members, already integrated in a way that would have taken Lyra months. This was her life now. Not survival, but living. Not enduring, but thriving. Thank you, Lyra said quietly. Draven looked at her. For what? For seeing past what I looked like when I arrived. For giving me a chance when you could have just honored the life debt and sent me away. I didn't give you anything. I opened a door. You're the one who walked through it and built something on the other side. He smiled slightly. Though I'll admit I'm glad you did. You've made this pack stronger. Later that night, after the celebration wound down and Era was asleep, Lyra stood at her window looking out at the northern territories. Somewhere far south, Marcus and Wren were probably still plotting, still looking for ways to undermine what she'd built. There would be more challenges, more people who didn't want her here, more battles to fight. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She'd survived exile. She'd survived winter. She'd survived people trying to break her, control her, erase her. And she'd done more than survive. She'd transformed, from victim to survivor to leader, from powerless to powerful. From Omega, who was told her only value was submission to advisor who shaped pack strategy. The journey had been brutal, but it had also been necessary. Lyra thought about the woman who'd crossed into Northern Territory months ago, starving, desperate, certain she was walking toward death. If she could go back and tell that woman what waited on the other side of that choice, she wasn't sure she'd be believed. But she'd tell her this: keep walking, keep fighting. Keep choosing yourself even when everyone else tells you you're worthless. Because on the other side of that impossible journey was a life worth living. A soft sound made her turn. Era was stirring, not quite awake, but restless. Lyra moved to the crib, gently soothed her daughter back to sleep. You're going to have a different life than I did, she whispered. You're going to grow up knowing you have choices, knowing your worth isn't determined by what others think you should be. Knowing you can refuse what doesn't serve you and build what does. Era's small hand wrapped around Lyra's finger, holding tight even in sleep. And Lyra understood, finally, what she'd really been fighting for all along. Not just survival, not just safety, freedom. The freedom to choose her own path, to define her own worth, to build a life on her own terms instead of accepting whatever scraps others deemed her worthy of. She'd found that freedom in the harshest place imaginable. In the frozen north, among people who should have been her enemies, in territory she'd been taught to fear. She'd found it because she'd refused to give up, refused to submit, refused to believe that her value was determined by anyone except herself. The outcast had become protected. The forgotten had become valued. The Omega who was supposed to be worthless had become irreplaceable. And the future that had seemed impossible, the one where her daughter grew up free, where Lyra herself mattered, where their lives were their own, was no longer a desperate dream. It was reality. Built one impossible choice at a time, one small victory stacked on another. One day of refusing to break followed by another and another until breaking was no longer even a possibility. Lyra looked out at the northern territories, her home now, earned and claimed, and smiled. She'd walked into this wild expecting to die. Instead, she'd learned to live. And that, she thought, was the greatest victory of all.